Chapter 11:22. Chi. Taizu waved his sleeves, and two more forces flew out to stabilize the barrier. The shattered part of the barrier was quickly covered by a thin layer of glittering glass. Boom! The forces of both sides collided again. Bang! One of the fist winds could not be stopped, and the door flew out. Looking at the empty door, Taizu's expression was very interesting. Junior brother Chuyu. Junior brother Chuyu. What's wrong with you? What happened? Zhong Sun's worried voice came from outside. Taizu's figure flashed and quickly disappeared, and he immediately withdrew the barrier. Chu Luiyue opened his eyes. The room was in a mess. But fortunately, Taizu's barrier helped her remove most of the power, so it did not cause any more serious consequences. Junior brother Chuyu. You are, Zhong Sun, who came to the door, was shocked. Even though it was night, he could still barely see the scene in the room with the help of the bright moonlight. Senior brother Zhong Sun, don't worry. Chu Luiyue stood up and smiled. I was just studying a martial technique just now and didn't control it well, so, martial technique? Zhong Sun's expression eased. He glanced at the door that was already dead, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Then you should have chosen a spacious place to practice. In the house, it was a moment of negligence this time. It won't happen again. Chu Luiyue smiled. That's good. Not to mention the other things in our academy, there are many places for cultivation. Why do you have to do it in the house? But, Junior brother Chuyu, you are a celestial physician, why do you have to spend so much effort on cultivation? Before Chu Luiyue could answer, his expression changed, revealing a look of understanding. You are a dual cultivator. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. I am indeed cultivating as a martial artist. Zhong Sun did not notice the mystery of these words and said, I see. It seems that you are quite talented in this area. However, junior brother Chuyu, since you have such top-notch talent in celestial physician, it is better to focus on this. Zhong Sun's words were rather direct. Even in Lingxiao College, celestial physician students were proud of themselves. Chu Luiyue chuckled and nodded. Thank you for your advice, senior brother Zhong Sun. Zhong Sun took a few more glances and gave a few more instructions before leaving. Muttered Chu Luiyue softly as she looked at the door that was dazzled beyond recognition. This door is too weak. I'll have to get a sturdier one tomorrow. It's not about the door. Taizu's voice suddenly sounded, as if he was suppressing something. Girl, why didn't you restrain yourself earlier? My old bones can't take it anymore. Chu Luiyue. Taizu, when did you get a bone? That's not important. In any case, you must be more careful in the future. Oh. Chu Luiyue made a sound of agreement. After a while, he asked again, what do you think? Are you really okay? Taizu snorted coldly. Ask me this question when you break through to the 9th rank. Chu Luiyue laughed. Yes. It seemed that it was a false alarm. After receiving Taizu's affirmative answer, Chu Luiyue was relieved. She did not continue to study the God-stunning fist. Instead, she began to devour the force, hoping to break through as soon as possible. However, she did not know that Taizu's mood had not calmed down for a long time. This girl was only at the early stage of the 7th rank, but she was already able to exert such strength from the peak of the Earth rank martial skill. It was simply too shocking. Was it because she was different from ordinary people, or was it because of that martial skill? That thing will appear at any time. This time, it will definitely attract countless people to chase after it crazily. If the item is left behind. Elder Bo Yan was saying something with a serious expression. The hall was silent, and everyone's expressions became more solemn. However, at this moment, Rongxiu suddenly turned around, frowned slightly, and looked in a certain direction. This movement, Elder Bo Yen paused. "What's wrong, Rongxiu? Is there a problem?" Rongxiu retracted his gaze, and the ripples in his eyes were completely hidden. "Nothing. Please continue, Elder." He leaned on the chair and placed one hand on the armrest. His posture was as lazy and noble as ever. However, his eyes drooped slightly. No one saw the faint light that flashed across his eyes. With this personality, he really could not calm down. He actually came back to the academy by himself. He rubbed his temples with a slight headache and looked at Elder Wanjing. After a moment, he leaned over slightly and asked in a low voice. "Elder Wanjing, were you delayed by something just now?" Elder Wanjing waved his hand. "Sigh. It's a bunch of brats who broke the rules and bet on pills again. They said that there was a new kid in the academy who had good eyesight in this aspect and did not know the rules, so they gathered a group of people. However, they have already been punished." Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. This plot was really familiar. Why are you asking this?" "Nothing." Rongxiu's thin lips curled up slightly and gave Elder Wanjing a warm and polite smile. Elder Wanjing felt that something was amiss. Why is this brat looking at me with a hint of sympathy? What does this mean? When he wanted to take a closer look, he saw that Rongxiu had already retracted his gaze and tilted his head slightly, as though he was seriously listening to Elder Bo Yan's words. Elder Wanjing suppressed the strange feeling in his heart. It was not that the academy had never recruited troublemakers before, but most of them would be obedient after being lectured. Except for that time, Elder Wanjing thought of something and trembled. He quickly suppressed his thoughts. The meeting in the Donghuang Bell Tower lasted until the second day. However, everyone present was strong, and it was fine for them to stay up for a night occasionally. "I'll have to trouble all of you for the rest." Elder Bo Yen stood up and said sincerely. Elder Bo Yen is too polite. We are students of the academy, and it's only right for us to do our best for the academy. Yes. It's our honor to be able to do what we can for the academy. Everyone said. Elder Bo Yen nodded. Everyone left one after another. Rongxiu moved slowly, and unknowingly, he was at the back. Some people did not forget to look back as they left, but they did not say anything. They knew very well that the academy elders treated Rongxiu differently from them. However, there was nothing they could do about it, as he was too strong. It would be strange if the elders did not trust him. After the crowd dispersed, only Rongxiu and a few elders were left in the surroundings. "Rongxiu, why haven't I heard you mention your consort before?" Elder Bo Yan's expression softened and became more amiable as he asked. "I heard, she's an outsider." As soon as he said those words, the other elders also turned to look at him. According to Rongxiu's current status, it was inappropriate for him to marry an outsider as his consort. Rongxiu smiled and nodded. Yes. Elder Bo Yan looked at his expression carefully, and his heart skipped a beat. Rongxiu should really like that girl. Another elder beside him shook his head and sighed. "Rongxiu, you're too stubborn. Now that you're the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, how can you marry such a girl as your consort?" Chapter 11:23. Here it comes. Rongxiu had already expected this, so when he heard this, there was no displeasure on his face. Instead, he smiled slightly. It seems that the letter from the Mausoleum of Immortal Water has already been sent to Elder Danqing. Elder Danqing frowned. The Mausoleum of Immortal Water didn't say much to this old man. You were the one who did it, so it will naturally spread. Could it be that you still want to hide this matter? His tone couldn't be considered good. The people beside him fell silent for a moment. Although they more or less had the same thought in their hearts, they wouldn't be as straightforward as Elder Danqing, nor would they be as agitated as him. The reason why he was particularly concerned about this matter was because he was Jiang Jiwan's master. His beloved disciple had suffered such grievances and was sad and upset. As her master, he naturally felt unhappy. Even when he looked at Rongxiu, he felt a bit of an eyesore. The consort selection ceremony was held publicly. Rongxiu smiled faintly. Everything that happened was witnessed by everyone with their own eyes. Elder Danqing choked. If that's the case, Rongxiu's actions can't be considered as an intentional cover-up. If Elder Danqing has any questions about what happened that day, I can immediately answer them for you, lest you listen to some unreliable rumors and get angry for no reason. Rongxiu was still smiling. However, these seemingly polite words were as sharp as a knife. Elder Danqing's expression was even uglier. Are you saying that Ziyuan lied and deliberately slandered you? I didn't say that. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. It's just that the person involved is here. No matter how much outsiders say, it's not as convenient and accurate as me saying it to you personally, isn't it? Outsiders. It was a simple and casual word, but it instantly separated Jiang Ziyuan and drew a clear line between them. Elder Danqing's chest felt stifled. He didn't want to get involved in this matter, but after Jiang Jiwan returned, she looked dejected and sad. He felt very distressed and couldn't help but question Rongxiu. But Rongxiu was right. Jiang Jiwan was indeed an outsider to him. Not to mention that Jiang Jiwan's status was not equal to his, Rongxiu had never shown any interest in Jiang Jiwan. In the end, it was all Jiang Jiwan's wishful thinking. All right, this is Rongxiu's own matter. He has always been a wise man of his own mind. Since he has made his decision, we shouldn't interfere. Elder said. Elder also nodded. That's Rongxiu. If you have time in the future, invite your princess consort to the academy. Rongxiu had spent quite some time in Lingxiao College. The dean and elders of the college were all seniors to him. It was normal for him to make such a request. Rongxiu paused for a rare moment, as if he was hesitating. Let's wait for a while. Now that the college is in trouble, bringing her here rashly might delay the elders' important matters. Also, she needs some time to get used to it. They didn't expect Rongxiu to reject him. The elders looked at each other in surprise. Who exactly is that girl for Rongxiu to be so protective of her? All right. Elder Bo Yen knew that this was Rongxiu's concession, so he didn't say anything else. At this moment, a melodious bell sound came from outside. Buzz! It was the sound of the Donghuang bell. The assessment at the beginning of the month is about to begin. Elder Wanzheng looked at Elder Bo Yen. According to tradition, Elder Bo Yen had to appear on such occasions. Elder Bo Yen nodded slightly. Let's go out. Rongxiu, you leave first, I'll accompany the elders to take a look. Rongxiu interrupted Elder Bo Yen and said with a smile. The elders were all astonished. Really? Rongxiu had always been cold and didn't like crowds. Even when he was in the college, he didn't appear on such occasions often. Let alone now. Yes. Rongxiu's smile deepened. I suddenly remembered that I haven't seen such a scene for a long time, and I miss it. The elders won't object to it, right? Of course not. Haha. If those brats know that you're going to appear, I wonder how excited they'll be. Elder Wanzheng laughed. Rongxiu's excellence was well known in the college. Even though he had left the college, his reputation was still well known in the college. Many students secretly looked up to him as a role model, hoping that one day, they could become as good as him. Or even surpass him. Rongxiu was silent for a moment, then smiled. Probably. Early in the morning, when the sun had just risen, Qingming Square was already bustling with noise and excitement. Countless students gathered here. Their young faces were full of vitality, and they all had different expressions. Excitement, agitation, nervousness, fighting spirit. They were either in groups of 3 or 5 or standing alone on the square. Their eyes were focused on the Eastern Emperor Bell Tower. So this is the test at the beginning of the month. I wonder if I can successfully become his disciple. I've been preparing for half a month. There shouldn't be any problems. My head hurts. I haven't understood the Xian formation that the teacher showed me last month. I'm afraid I'm in trouble this time. Haha. I just broke through 2 days ago. Hee hee. Who knows, my ranking might even rise today. Everyone was discussing. The gathering of all kinds of voices made the originally quiet square much livelier. Chu Luiyue and Zhong Sun stood in the celestial physician's area. However, their position was more remote, and they were connected to the Xian master's area not far away. Standing here, they could still hear some of the Xian master's low murmurs. Chu Luiyue followed everyone's gaze and looked at the Eastern Emperor Bell Tower. Why does everyone seem to be looking over there? Zhong Sun's expression could not hide his excitement. Because the Azure Cloud leaderboard will appear on the Eastern Emperor Bell Tower soon. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Azure Cloud leaderboard. Digression, it's finally over today. Congratulations. What kind of mooncakes are everyone eating? Chapter 11:24. She wasn't unfamiliar with this name. When she was sparring with Rong Xiu, she had unintentionally blurted out this name. But at that time, she didn't know what the Azure Cloud role was. So it was the Lingxiao College's role, you don't know? Looking at Chu Luiyue's expression, Zhong Sun thought that she had never heard of it, so he patiently explained. The Azure Cloud role is the overall role of Lingxiao College for 10,000 years. It records all the top geniuses that have appeared in the long history of the college. This role is divided into a total of 4 sub-roles. They are Martial Artist, Mystic Master, Celestial Physician, and Weapon Refiner. And they are also respectively listed on the walls of the East, South, West, and Northeast Bell Tower. As long as you are a student of the college and below the age of 30, you have the chance to rely on your own strength to ascend the Azure Cloud role. The day at the beginning of every month is a big day in the college. Some people take the test to become a disciple, some seek treasures, but the most important thing is to ascend the role. As long as your name is on the Azure Cloud roll, it will be much better. Even the dean and elders will think highly of you. Chu Luiyue understood. No wonder, what? I was just thinking that no wonder everyone is so excited and attaches so much importance to the Azure Cloud roll. Chu Luiyue crossed her arms, tapped her chin, and smiled as if she was in deep thought. It was no wonder that she didn't remember anything and could actually say those words when she was sparring with Rong Xiu. It seemed that surpassing Rong Xiu's ranking on the Azure Cloud roll was also one of her obsessions in the past. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a little curious and looked at the grand and simple black wall of the East Emperor Bell Tower. The Azure Cloud roll, I wonder which roll Rong Xiu is on and what is his ranking. Creak, a door of the East Emperor Bell Tower opened. Someone walked out from inside. This movement caused the noisy crowd to immediately quiet down. They all knew that the elders were about to come out. But very quickly, everyone discovered that in the group of people that walked out, other than the familiar elder, there were actually more than 10 young men and women. The Dongguang Bell Tower had always only been accessible to the most influential elders of the academy. The sudden appearance of such a group of people naturally raised suspicions. Soon, people recognized some of the people among them. Hey, isn't that the young master of the family way? Why is he here? Young master of family way. Which family way? Who else could it be? Naturally, it's the Chingdupa family Wei. Hiss, so it's him. It was rumored that this young Master Wei was extremely talented and highly regarded by the family Wei. He was almost the most likely successor of the family Wei. However, didn't he finish his studies last year and leave the academy? Why are you here now? Look. The one beside her seemed to be the meteor sect's second Miss, Ruer. Why is she here? Haven't you noticed that those are the disciples of first-rate aristocratic families who came from the academy? Someone whispered. Everyone looked and it seemed to be true. Most of them had already left the academy. Only a few of them were still studying in the academy. When these people gathered together, the power behind them was enough to shake the entire Divine Ruins world. It was no wonder that the crowd had such a reaction. Suddenly, the crowd quieted down. The surrounding space seemed to have stagnated for a moment. Chu Luiyue felt the subtle change in the atmosphere and looked up. Because she was standing very far away and at the back, she couldn't see the appearance of the person who walked out clearly. However, when the tall and slender man in white walked out, Chu Luiyue recognized him almost instantly. The sky was clear and the sun was just right. The black Dongguang bell tower behind him emitted a faint cold aura. The reliefs on the bronze door were lifelike and dignified, reflecting the white Qingming square. He was the third color that was the brightest and most eye-catching among the two extreme colors. He was dressed in white and looked like an immortal. However, his eyelids were slightly drooping. A faint shadow was cast on his jade-like face. From afar, he looked like a white jade immersed in the dark blue sea. Once he appeared, he easily took away everyone's line of sight. There were many handsome men and beautiful women among the people who walked out. However, compared to him, they instantly lost their flavor and became small and blurry. The crowd fell silent because of his appearance. Then, he seemed to feel something and looked up. Those eyes. Everyone who was touched by this gaze felt their minds tremble. They didn't know what kind of person could have such a pair of unfathomable eyes. They seemed to be able to swallow everything. However, in the blink of an eye, there seemed to be an additional layer of gentleness that could make people recklessly sink into it. Some women looked at him in a daze. Their faces had already turned red. However, he was only looking at one person at the end of his line of sight. Chu Luiyue and his eyes met. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled slightly. Then, she inexplicably felt a little guilty and looked away. However, she regretted it the moment she looked away. What was she guilty about? It should be Rong Xiao who was guilty. He must have known that she had come to Lingxiao College before, but he deliberately didn't mention it. He even deliberately avoided her when news came from Lingxiao College. In the end, he was the one who lacked confidence. However, when Chu Luiyue looked up again, she saw that there were a few more elders beside Rong Xiao. They were whispering something to Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao was very tall. For the sake of convenience, he lowered his head slightly and seemed to be listening carefully. Then, he nodded. His expression was indifferent and calm. The dozen or so young men and women who walked out earlier were standing at the edge of the crowd. In comparison, Rong Xiao's position was very special. He was actually standing together with the elders. Moreover, it seemed that the elders' attitude towards Rong Xiao was also very friendly and polite. At this moment, the crowd finally regained their senses and started whispering. God! Who is that man? He's so handsome. If he's a student of the school, he should have some impression of him. He looks a little like a person. Could it be Yuntian Tower? Isn't that the holy son of Yuntian Tower, Rong Xiao? I heard that he left the school a few years ago. I didn't expect to see him today. Rong Xiao. It's the rumored Rong Xiao. The crowd exclaimed. Elder Bo Yen had sharp ears and eyes. Naturally, he easily caught everyone's reaction. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile. As expected. Once you arrive, this must be the scene. If not, I'll let you take over the assessment at the beginning of the month, Rong Xiao said humbly. I don't dare to take over Elder Bo Yan's responsibility. Please. Elder Bo Yan laughed and took a step forward. I am Bo Yan. On behalf of Lingxiao College, I welcome everyone. Chapter 11:25. His kind and dignified gaze quickly swept across the crowd. His low and deep voice was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. Chu Luiyue only felt as if thunder had exploded beside her ears, and her blood also flowed along with it. It was enough to show how powerful he was. Her heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Lingxiao College indeed lived up to its reputation. Elder Bo Yan's words made many people excited. Especially those new students who had just entered the school within this 1 month. Being able to enter Lingxiao College and cultivate here was something that many people dreamed of. At this moment, standing here and listening to the elder of the school speak, how could they not be excited? Today's assessment, as usual, is divided into 2 parts. Elder Bo Yan placed one hand behind his back. The first part, New Students' Apprenticeship. The new students who entered the school last month, after this period of understanding, should have roughly found the teacher that they most like. As long as you can pass the corresponding assessment today, you can successfully enter the school. If you don't pass the assessment, you will be given another chance to choose another teacher. But if you still don't pass the second time, then you will have to leave the school immediately. You can only come again after 3 months. The crowd was silent. The nervousness in many people's eyes became more obvious. Lingxiao College is indeed strict, Chu Luiyue muttered softly. Even if you passed the first round of assessment by the elders in Fang State City, it didn't mean that you were officially a student of the school from now on. Within the school, there were even more stringent assessments waiting for them. One had to know that the previous assessment standards were already very high, and with this one, who knew how many people would be filtered out? Many geniuses who were revered and envied outside didn't even have the qualifications to enter here. But Lingxiao College had this kind of capital. What they wanted was the existence at the top of the line. Junior brother Chuyu, don't worry, with your talent and strength, you will definitely pass the assessment smoothly. Zhong Sun thought that she was worried about him, so he comforted her. Chu Luiyue smiled in response, and didn't explain further. The second part is the assessment of the students and the change of the green cloud role. This will depend on your own abilities. Chu Luiyue could clearly feel that when Elder Bo Yan mentioned the Azure Sky Proclamation, everyone's emotions had clearly become even more agitated. Good. Let's not talk about anything else. The monthly assessment begins. With Elder Bo Yan's command, all the elders went to their positions. Soon, the figures of several elders appeared in the center of the square. All freshmen, step forward. Elder Wanjing shouted in a deep voice. After a moment of silence, a young man walked out. He had been standing in the crowd of mystic cultivators and was running towards a few mystic cultivator elders. With the first one, the rest of the freshmen also walked out one after another. Zhong Sun looked at Chu Luiyue. Just as he was about to pat her shoulder to encourage her, he suddenly felt a chill sweep over him. His movement stiffened, and he subconsciously looked in the direction of that cold aura, but he didn't see anything. It was as if that moment of fear was just an illusion. Chu Luiyue had already walked forward. Zhong Sun could only wave his hand from behind to cheer her on. Junior brother Chu Yu, do your best. Although this voice wasn't loud, it still attracted the attention of many people around. This was because the name Chu Yu was simply too popular in the academy these 2 days. For 3 consecutive days, he won all the pill gambling matches. One had to know that even many old foxes in the academy might not be able to achieve this level. In addition to yesterday's farce on the last day of the month, hundreds of people were implicated and had their points deducted. Even if Chu Luiyue didn't want to make it public, she had no choice. Look! That's Chu Yu. All sorts of voices came from the crowd. He's the one who's so daring to gather people for pill gambling. The corner of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched slightly. I thought he would be a fierce man, but I didn't expect him to be a pretty boy. He looks rather delicate and pretty. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, no one would believe that this kid is so daring, right? Chu Luiyue, something doesn't seem right. I just want to earn some points easily. Why am I suddenly being accused of such a big crime? Get rid of me. If I knew that rule, I definitely wouldn't have broken it, okay? Hence, Chu Luiyue welcomed everyone's gazes, passed through the crowd, and walked to the front. This was an empty space that was specially set aside. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and looked forward. Right in front of her was the Donghuang Bell Tower. Downstairs, there were a few elders and a few young people who looked like students. 4 men and 1 woman. Including Chu Luiyue, there were only 6 people on the celestial physician side who needed to be assessed to become a disciple. After Chu Luiyue stood still, she looked at both sides. On the left was the Xian master, and there were about 20 new students. Chu Luiyue quickly saw Lin Qifei standing inside. After not seeing him for a while, his body seemed to have recovered. His originally pale face was now a little more lively and rosy. It was no longer as fragile as before, where it seemed like it would be destroyed with a casual touch. He was dressed in a green robe. Although his figure was slightly thin, his gentle and distant temperament made him appear very otherworldly. As if sensing something, Lin Qifei glanced over. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze and looked to her right. There were no new students on this side. Oh, there aren't even any elders. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. This is really straightforward. When Elder Wenxi brought them in, he had mentioned that there were very few blacksmiths in the academy. However, Chu Luiyue did not expect it to be so few. From where they were standing, they could not see the situation on the Xian master's side. However, they knew that there should be the most people there. Which one of you wants to go first? Elder Wanjing stood with his hands behind his back and slowly swept his gaze across them. He was actually not very fierce, but it was a pity that he was born with a dignified square face. When he was not smiling, it was easy for him to give off an extremely heavy pressure. Those who were not familiar with him would easily misunderstand that he had a bad temper. The few students standing in front of Chu Luiyue actually felt a little timid and nervous when they were questioned like this. For a moment, no one spoke. Elder Wanzheng was already used to this scene, so he didn't mind. His gaze turned, and it landed on Chu Luiyue. Kid! You go first. Most of the new students who had just entered the academy were filled with reverence and curiosity. It was easy for them to not be able to let go of everything. However, this Chu Yu was different. He had only been here for a few days, but he had already caused a pile of trouble. With the previous incident as a foundation, his psychological tolerance should be much higher now. Everyone looked over. Chu Luiyue took a step forward. A pair of deep and tangible eyes landed on her shoulder. Chapter 11:26. Have you decided on a teacher? Elder Wanjing asked. Chu Luiyue nodded. May I have the honor of becoming your student? Elder Wanzheng was taken aback. The other elders beside him also turned to look at Zhang Xian with peculiar gazes. Really? You really think so? It wasn't strange for Elder Wanzheng to have such a reaction. Even though he was one of the stronger celestial physician elders, he had a strict personality and had high expectations for his students. Thus, he wasn't the best choice for his students. One must know that the cultivation of a celestial physician was different from that of others. Most of the time, they would need a teacher to guide them step by step. Under such circumstances, most of them would choose a teacher who was gentle and easy to get along with. At the very least, they wouldn't have to live under pressure all the time. Elder Wanzheng had been like that for the past few years. It was said that he hadn't accepted a disciple for 3 whole years. It wasn't because no one wanted to acknowledge him as their teacher, but because none of them had passed his examination. Thus, everyone was surprised to hear Chu Liuyue's choice. You have to be prepared to endure hardships if you want to be my student. Elder Wanzheng looked at him suspiciously. Are you sure you can do it with that small body of yours? Chu Liyue chuckled softly. You'll know whether I can do it or not when you see it for yourself. Elder Wanzheng laughed heartily. You're young, but you sure know how to boast. Very well. Since you've said so, I'll test you personally. It was rare for Elder Wanzheng to lose his temper, and this piqued his interest. He waved his hand and took out 2 pieces of paper. With a flick of his wrist, the 2 pieces of paper flew toward Chu Liyue. She raised her hand and caught them. Elder Wanzheng smiled. What's written here is the formula for the pill that I've recently concocted. However, one of them is real, while the other is fake. As long as you can tell which one is real, you'll win. As soon as he finished speaking, many people looked at each other. Test the authenticity of the formula. Isn't that too easy? What do you know? That was a prescription written by Elder Wanzheng himself. How can it be seen through so easily? Exactly. In the past 3 years, Elder Wanzheng had only used this move when assessing new students. Even now, no one had been able to pass this test. I heard that Chu 16 is already an 8th rank celestial physician. Maybe he can do it, I don't think so. In the past, there were others who were as outstanding as him, or even better. Didn't Elder Wanzheng take a liking to them? I wonder why Elder Wanzheng's standards are so high. Sigh, Chu Liyue looked at the 2 prescriptions in his hand. This piece of paper was the size of a normal piece of paper, but the names of over 100 medicinal herbs were listed on it. Such a small and thin piece of paper simply couldn't fit them all. Not long after she took a look at it, Chu Liyue realized that the words on it had disappeared. Then, a few lines of words appeared on the clean paper. This was the content immediately before. For medicinal herbs alone, the words appeared a total of 4 times. The 5th time was the final treatment. After Chu Liyue roughly read through it, the words disappeared again. This time, there were no other traces. This also meant that even if Chu Liyue was fully focused from the start to the end, she could only barely finish reading 1 prescription. It was extremely difficult for an ordinary person to finish reading it, let alone distinguish the real from the fake. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and looked at the other one. The same thing happened again. Fortunately, Chu Liyue was prepared this time. She didn't look as nervous and uneasy as before. In fact, before the last line of words disappeared, she had already retracted her gaze and returned the 2 prescriptions. Many people sighed with regret. It seemed that Chu couldn't make it. Well, how many people in the world could pass such a perverted test? You're not reading anymore. Have you given up? Elder Wanzheng took the 2 pieces of paper with an as expected expression. Anyway, he didn't expect anyone to. The first one I read was fake. The second one is real. Chu Liyue said calmly and seriously. What? Elder Wanzheng didn't react immediately. His expression froze for a moment. Chu Liyue smiled slightly and explained in more detail. Although the blood cinnamon can refresh one's spirit and nourish one's qi, when placed together with the white bamboo fruit, the medicinal effect will be greatly neutralized. Moreover, there are 2 white bamboo fruits, which add a bit of coldness. It's harmful. Also, plum blossom caltrip can't be put in together with the frozen stone. The smell of plum blossom caltrip will greatly affect the thickness of the ice layer on the frozen stone. If you're not careful, the frozen stone will be completely destroyed and lose its medicinal effect. Chu Liuyue's voice was very soft as she spoke tirelessly. The surroundings gradually quieted down. Elder Wanzhang's eyes slowly widened. Do you still want to continue? Chu Liyue asked. After saying so much, anyone who knew a little about celestial physician should be able to understand, right? You. How can you tell? Elder Wanzhang's voice was trembling a little. Chu Liyue chuckled lightly. Naturally, I saw it with my eyes. No, what I mean is, as Elder Wanzhang spoke, he saw the sly smile of the young man opposite him. Elves are intelligent and outstanding. Elder Wanzhang's heart beat faster. As a celestial physician, he knew too well how precious this young man's talent was. It wasn't that there weren't people who had a photographic memory, but there were very few people who could be like Chu Yu, who could clearly remember the medicinal ingredients, the dosage, and even the order in which they were refined. The most precious thing was that he was very clear about the characteristics of these pills and had mastered them through a comprehensive study. He had a thorough understanding of them. A thought popped up in Elder Wanzhang's mind. He finally found a treasure again. There's no need. Elder Wanzhang said repeatedly. His square face, which always looked serious, couldn't hide his excitement at this moment. There was a smile at the corner of his eyes. This is enough. You pass. If he didn't accept this, then he would really be punished by the heavens. Back then, he couldn't win against the dean. Now, it was finally his turn. Chu Liyue blinked. Pass. That's it. Well, it seemed that Elder Wanzhang's request wasn't that high after all. If the surrounding people knew what Chu Liyue was thinking, they would probably gang up on her. You may have it easy, but have you considered others? Do you know how hard we've been living? Okay. Chu Yu. From today onwards, you're my, wait. Before Elder Wanzhang could finish, he was suddenly interrupted. He was stunned. He turned around to look at the other celestial physician and felt a little uneasy. Then, he heard one of them say to Chu Liyue with a smile. Chu Yu, I wonder if you're interested in joining us. Elder Wanzhang snorted. They were here to snatch him. Chapter 11:27. What are you guys doing here? Didn't you hear Chu Yu say that he wants to be my disciple? Isn't it too much to try and snatch him now? Elder Wanzhang said bluntly. However, the elders didn't seem to care. This child is new here and doesn't know much about the academy. It's normal for him to make the wrong choice in such a rash situation. It's not too late to let the child take a good look at him before choosing a master. That's right. Wanzhang, who would be willing to follow you when you're always pulling a long face? They would be scared to death by you. Chu Yu is still young. How can he endure this kind of torture? Chu Yu, I think you should come to my side. I guarantee that you won't be worse than Wanzhang. The few teachers decided to speak openly about it. Celestial physician geniuses were rare to begin with. How could they not be tempted when they met such an outstanding one? At this time, they had to put their pride aside for the time being. It was more important to snatch the talent. Chu Liyue was speechless. The celestial physician elders weren't weak at all. The sudden change and the strange style of the scene left the surrounding onlookers dumbfounded. Weren't the elders very arrogant? Weren't the masters all very cold and aloof? What was going on now? The new students who hadn't taken the test had different expressions when they saw the situation. Some were envious, some were jealous, and some were expressionless. Fourth brother, look, I told you that the kid would definitely do it. Luo Yanming looked at the situation from afar and couldn't help but laugh. However, his eyes were still filled with amazement and surprise. He knew that Chu Yu was outstanding, but he didn't expect him to pass Elder Wanzheng's test. With such talent, as long as he cultivated well in the academy, his future would be limitless. Luo Yanlin nodded slightly. He looked at the young man in a different light. Actually, at the beginning, he did not take Chu Yu seriously. However, from the looks of it now, Chu Yu seemed to be much stronger than he had expected. At the very least, he hadn't seen the elders fighting over a student in public for a long time. Especially when they were all proud celestial physician. I didn't expect such a dark horse to appear in this test. Elder Bo Yen, who was standing on the Donghuang Bell Tower, said in surprise. What a pleasant surprise. Although he didn't cultivate celestial physician, he could see that the young man named Shi Yu was extremely talented. At this moment, Elder's gaze, Elder Bo Yen saw Rong Xiao staring at the young man. Why? Does Rong Xiao have any opinions about that young man? Rong Xiao retracted his gaze, and his lips curved up. She is indeed outstanding. A light flashed across Elder Bo Yan's old and sharp eyes. It's to receive such a compliment. Rong Xiao had never been interested in such things, and he wouldn't even say a word about the people and things that he didn't care about. Moreover, he himself was a top genius. There were very few people who were qualified to be praised and acknowledged by him. Rong Xiao smiled. Someone who can make Elder Wanjing thirst for talent naturally has her abilities. That's true. Elder Bo Yen stroked his beard. Ever since that time, Elder Wanjing had failed to win against the dean. He had become much stricter than before. This was also why he hadn't taken in a disciple for such a long time. After seeing a true genius who was like a gift from the heavens, when he looked at others, he found them to be unbearably vulgar and unworthy of his attention. Elder Wanzheng was stubborn. He wouldn't lower his standards. Today, he finally met someone he liked. Of course, he wouldn't give up. There seems to be a few good seedlings over at the martial artist's side. They seem to have potential. But this time, Rong Xiao still had a faint smile on his face. He only grunted. He didn't even look at the martial artist's side. He didn't want to bother with them. Elder Bo Yen was even more confused. He couldn't help but look at Chu Luyue. Rong Xiao's personality didn't change. He still didn't care about other things. What he cared about was, elders, thank you for your favor. But Chu Yu was Elder Wanzheng's disciple first, so... Facing the aggressive attacks of the elders, Chu Luyue didn't seem to panic. She smiled politely and rejected them one by one. From start to finish, her mind didn't seem to waver. Seeing her firm attitude, the elders were a little disappointed. But they gave up in the end. They had no choice. If you want to snatch someone, you have to see if the person is willing to be snatched. Elder Wanzheng was delighted. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ha ha ha. You want to snatch someone from me? No way. It wasn't easy to get such a precious genius. Of course, he had to nurture her well. Thinking about how he punished Chu Luyue yesterday, Elder Wanzheng had mixed feelings. Fortunately, this child was magnanimous. She didn't take that matter to heart. Otherwise, he would have missed such a great opportunity. Kid, don't worry. In the future, with me around, I won't let anyone bully you. Elder Wanzheng said solemnly. Chu Luyue smiled. Then, thank you, Elder Master. Elder Wanzheng was overjoyed when he heard her call him master. Good, good, good. When we get back, we'll do the ceremony properly. Elder Wanzheng was overjoyed. He was in high spirits. This made the atmosphere at the Celestial Physician's place more relaxed than before. But at the same time, it gave rise to more subtle feelings. Because Chu Luiyue was the first to take the test. She was the first to take the test and performed so well. She even successfully became Elder Wanzheng's disciple. Without a doubt, she put a lot of pressure on the rest of the people. Everyone was a celestial physician. They were especially sensitive in this aspect. They could see that Chu Luiyue was indeed very talented in this aspect. If it were them, it would be difficult for them to even memorize the contents of the 2 prescriptions. Not to mention that she could accurately determine the authenticity of the prescriptions and even point out the problems in them. For a moment, there were many people who were envious and jealous. After Chu Luiyue passed the test, she took a step back and stood aside, giving her position to the others. Next! An elder shouted. The rest of the people looked at each other. The girl was the first to step forward. I'll do it. Chu Luiyue glanced at the girl. She seemed to be in her 20s. Her skin was fair, her nose was straight, and her eyes were watery. However, there was a hint of arrogance in her eyes. It made her look cold and distant. She walked straight to Elder Wanzheng. Elder Wanzheng, I would also like to be your disciple. She turned her gaze slightly and looked at Chu Luiyue with a hint of provocation. Chu Luiyue chuckled. The students of Lingxiao College were really competitive. Chapter 11:28. Elder Wanzheng seemed to be used to this. He laughed and threw out 2 prescriptions. Good. This is the prescription for another type of pill. Take a look. The woman took it with both hands and glanced at it. Her expression changed quickly. She was standing at the back just now, so she didn't know that the words on the paper would appear alternately. When she saw how relaxed Chu Luiyue was, she thought, just as she was panicking, the words on the paper disappeared. Soon, new names of herbs appeared. The woman realized that she had underestimated the situation. Cold sweat started to appear on her forehead. Wu Xian is already a 9th grade celestial physician. She should be able to pass the test more easily than Chu Yu, right? She's only 21 this year. Her talent isn't much worse than Chu Yu's. Maybe Chu Yu won't be able to reach Wu Xian's level when he's 21. That's not necessarily true. If Elder Wanzheng's test is so easy to pass, why hasn't anyone succeeded in the past 3 years? There's no lack of 9th grade celestial physician in there. Ah. In that case, how did Chu Yu pass? Isn't he a little too smart? Whispers could be heard from the people behind him. Wu Xian became more and more nervous. She was very confident in herself and believed that she was the most outstanding one among these people. Therefore, when he saw everyone praising that Chu Yu endlessly, a bit of a competitive heart was born, and he wanted to win against him. But she didn't expect the test to be so difficult. The more she read, the more anxious and confused Wu Xian became. How did Chu Yu remember so many herbs at once? He even found the problem with them. Soon, the last line of words disappeared. Wu Xian hurriedly looked at the second sheet. However, her mind was in a mess. Even if she had 10% of her strength, she could only use 70 to 80%. The words on the second piece of paper overlapped and soon disappeared. Are you done reading? Elder Wanzheng looked at the 2 sheets of white paper in her hand and asked. I'm done reading. Wu Xian's voice was weak, and her hands were trembling. Then tell me. Which one is real and which one is fake? Wu Xian was silent for a long time. It was only when Elder Wanjing urged him that he gritted his teeth and gave an answer. The first one is real, the second one is. No, the second one is real. Elder Wanjing didn't say anything and just stared at her. After a long while, Wu Xian finally gave in. She lowered her head, her cheeks flushed red. She opened her mouth and finally said, "Don't worry. This student does not know." There was a hint of unwillingness and shame in her words. It was her first time admitting her incompetence in front of so many people. However, Elder Wanjing had seen too many of these situations. He raised his hand and shot out a beam of origin power. The two pieces of paper silently turned to dust. "You still have a second chance." Wu Xian was shocked. Only then did she remember that Elder Bo Yen had mentioned before that everyone only had 2 chances to be apprenticed. If the first time didn't work, there was always a second time. However, if he failed twice, he would be chased out and unable to officially become a student of the academy. She bit her lip and suddenly looked at Chu Luyue. "Elder Wanjing, this student has something to ask. Was the prescription that Chu looked at the same level as mine? If it wasn't lower level and simpler than hers, how could it be so easy?" Chu Yu's prescription used a total of 198 types of herbs. "Yours is 181. Elder Wanjing glanced at her and smiled. "Any other questions?" Wu Xian's face turned red and white. "No. No more." With that, she bit her lip and retreated to the side. There seemed to be tears in her eyes. She looked at Chu Luyue with a complicated gaze. "This young man, is he really so much stronger than me?" However, Chu Luyue didn't take her seriously. Because at this moment, that familiar gaze was still on her. She resisted the urge to look up. Next. The celestial physician's side was relatively quiet, but the Xian master and martial artist's side was much more lively. Some succeeded, some failed. Some were happy, some were disappointed. However, this kind of situation happened every month, so the older students were already used to it. Chu Luyue glanced out of the corner of his eye and happened to see that Lin Qifei seemed to have passed the assessment. His talent was stronger than what he had displayed, so it was naturally not a problem for him to get into Lingxiao College. After that, Luo Yanming also successfully passed. Chu Luyue glanced at them and thought that Luo Shishir and Zhuxing shouldn't have any problems. The new student assessment progressed very quickly. The celestial physician's side was the first to finish. Including Chu Luyue, a total of 4 of the 6 people passed the test. As for the remaining 2, they failed regretfully. The elimination rate for the Xian master's side was almost a quarter. Looking at the dejected young faces, Chu Luyue's brows twitched slightly. Lingxiao College's threshold was indeed extremely high. However, this atmosphere of joy and sadness quickly dissipated. This was because, after the first part of the new student assessment ended, even more people were eagerly waiting for the azure cloud roll. Countless eyes looked at the Donghuang Bell Tower. Elder Bo Yen laughed out loud. "Looks like you've all waited anxiously. Fine, I'll release the roll now." As he spoke, he waved his sleeve. The Donghuang bell rang 3 times in a row. Dong! 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 In the next moment, thousands of rays of light flew out, shining brilliantly. Countless rays of light converged on the iron-black wall, forming neatly arranged names. Chu Luyue looked up. She was looking at the celestial physician roll. A familiar name suddenly appeared. "Digression, I'm going out for a whole day today, so I'm very tired." Chapter 1129. Rongxiu. Chu Luyue was stunned when she saw the familiar name at the top of the list. Rongxiu is actually on the celestial physician list. And he's so close to the top. How? How could he be number one? Chu Luiyue muttered softly. Elder Wanzheng looked up and narrowed his eyes when he heard her voice. You mean Rongxiu? He's not number one. Chu Luiyue turned to look at him. Rongxiu is number two. There's another person above him. Another person. Chu Luiyue looked up again, but she didn't see another name above Rongxiu. Number one's name has been erased. Elder Wanzheng's tone was a little strange. Why is that? Chu Luiyue couldn't figure it out. Since everyone wanted to be on the list, why would the number one's name be erased? That's the dean's doing. After the number one's name was placed on the list, it disappeared not long after. Many new students thought that Rongxiu was number one, but that wasn't the case. Elder Wanzheng lifted his chin. Look carefully. The number one position is engraved with the dean's seal. Chu Luiyue took a closer look. Indeed, there seemed to be a faint layer of pressure at the top. But why would the dean do that? Chu Luiyue wanted to say something, but stopped. A top figure like him should have his own considerations. She guessed that it would be a waste of time to ask Elder Wanzheng. But this is something that happened a few years ago. Not many people in the academy talk about it now, so not many people know about it. Even if they knew that something was wrong with the list, the elders and students tacitly chose to keep quiet. Elder Wanzheng suddenly sighed softly. If he hadn't accepted Chu Luiyue as his disciple, he wouldn't have mentioned this matter. After all, some things were in the past. It's fine as long as you know about it. There's no need to dwell on it. Now, it's not wrong to say that Rongxiu is the celestial physician on the Azure Cloud leaderboard. Chu Yu, you have to cultivate more in the future and strive to be on the list as soon as possible. Elder smiled and patted Chu Luiyue's shoulder. His usually solemn square face was surprisingly kind at this moment. He looked at Chu Luiyue with sparkling eyes, as if he had high expectations of her. A faint sense of uneasiness grew in her heart. Master, what do you mean? Elder Wanzheng chuckled. Don't worry. I won't ask you to be on the list now. I'll give you 3 months. The rankings looked at the last name. There was the last name first. There were only 100 names on the proclamation of Azure Clouds, and the last name seemed to be a man's name, Bian Wenhao. That Bian Wenhao, how strong is he now? Chu Luiyue asked in a low voice. Not strong. That kid is now at the peak of the 9th rank. As long as you reach the peak of the 9th rank, with your spiritual energy as a celestial physician, you'll definitely surpass him. Chu Luiyue was speechless. Elder Wanzheng, you seem to have misunderstood me. No matter how talented I am, isn't it a little too much for you to expect me to break through from the 8th rank to the 9th rank in 3 months? Besides, I just broke through to the 8th rank at the Heavenly Cave Cliff. Is there a problem? Elder Wanzheng looked at her lovingly. Do you want me to cheer you on? Chu Luiyue replied. I'll definitely do my best. That's my good disciple. Only then did Elder Wanzheng heave a sigh of relief. It was quite difficult to find another genius like that scourge. Otherwise, he wouldn't have failed to find one in the past few years. Now, he finally had Chu Yu. With more effort, he should also be a promising talent. Elder Wanzheng was comfortable, but Chu Luiyue was uncomfortable. She glanced at the Qingyun ranking again. The last 100th place was at the peak of the 9th rank. Then, what about Rongxiu? She no longer had any interest in finding that man and asking him about it. The gap was too big. What else was there to ask? Looking at the unfamiliar names on the ranking, Chu Luiyue let out a long breath. She still had a lot to learn in Lingxiao College. Other than the Celestial Physician ranking, the other 3 rankings had also been hung up. The mystic masters and martial artists had gathered the most people, but the blacksmiths were still quiet. Other than an elder standing there symbolically, there wasn't even anyone looking at the ranking. The older students were used to it, but the new students were busy with themselves, so it was very empty for a while. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to take a look at the two rankings, but unfortunately, it was too crowded and lively. She thought for a moment and walked over to the blacksmiths. Unlike the celestial physician ranking, there was only a short section on the blacksmith's ranking. This meant that there were less than 100 people on it. Chu Luiyue looked at the name at the top, and her pupils constricted. It was actually Rong Xiao Tu. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. She paused and walked back a few steps. From where she was standing, she could see the two rankings. It was obvious that Rong Xiao's name on the celestial physician ranking was obviously one level lower than his name on the blacksmith's ranking. Rong Xiao was the true number one on the blacksmith's ranking. Chu Luiyue finally couldn't help but look at Rong Xiao, who was standing on the Donghuang Bell Tower. This man, he actually hid so much. It didn't take a genius to figure out exactly how formidable his strength was since he was able to obtain such a ranking on the Ascension rankings. Rong Xiao looked down. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and walked toward the ranking. The crowd was noisy. So this is the Qingyun ranking. Sigh, I finally made it last month, but I didn't make any breakthroughs this month. I'm afraid I'll be squeezed down again. I heard that those who have completely broken through to the divine level can only make it into the top 20. I really don't know what kind of monsters are those who are ranked in front. I heard that Senior Rong Xiao has been on the ranking for many years, and no one has broken through to this day. He's really amazing. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled slightly. As expected, Rong Xiao's name was still in the first place. However, there was a small blank space under his name. Thinking of what Elder Wanjing said just now, she suddenly understood something. Some of the new students were still asking questions. The first place is Senior Rong Xiao, then what's the matter with the second place? That's right. Why is there a blank space out of nowhere? Shoot, hearing this, the senior students hurriedly signaled for them to be quiet. The person who occupies the second place is a special student in the academy. His name is not to be mentioned. It's fine if you don't understand since you're new here, but don't talk about this in the future. Many of the new students were confused. Why is that? There's no reason. In short, from now on, you will abide by this rule. You came to the academy to improve your own cultivation. Other people's matters have nothing to do with you, understand? Thank you for your teachings, senior brother. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and she went to look at the Xian Master ranking. Rong Xiao's name was in second place. His name had been erased, just like the Celestial Physician ranking. Chapter 1130. A strange feeling arose in Chu Luiyue's heart. There were a total of 4 rankings on the Azure Cloud roll. Rong Xiao occupied the first place on the Weapon Refiner and Martial Artist rankings. That mysterious student occupied the first place on the other 2 rankings, Celestial Physician and Mystic Master. To be able to stand up to Rong Xiao, one didn't need to think to know that the person must be very formidable. But such a powerful student should be doted on by the dean and elders. Why would they deliberately erase that person's name? From the way Elder Bo Yan and the others treated Rong Xiao, it could be seen that they should be especially tolerant and gentle towards students with outstanding talent and strength. But only this person, Chu Luiyue, recalled what she heard from Zhong Sun. Could it be that the person whose name was erased was actually the dean's disciple? Chu Luiyue sized up the Azure Cloud roll and was slightly stunned. She almost forgot one thing. Her name didn't seem to be on the Azure Cloud roll. Chu Luiyue wasn't thinking of her current name, Chu Yu, but her previous name in Lingxiao College. Since she once wanted to surpass Rong Xiao's name on the Azure Cloud roll, then she should have the strength back then. At the very least, she should be on the Azure Cloud roll, right? But no. Chu Luiyue looked back and forth several times, but she didn't see her name. Then, maybe she didn't use her real name back then. Chu Luiyue's gaze lingered on the blank space where the name was erased on the Azure Cloud roll for a while. A bold and absurd thought surged in her mind, but she quickly suppressed it. Not to mention other things, just in the martial artist role alone, one must be a god-level powerhouse to enter the top 20. But she wasn't. She wasn't at her peak either. In that case, this conjecture seemed completely nonsensical. At this moment, a loud voice came from the crowd. Student Li Ziming challenges the 100th on the Azure Cloud roll, Sun Xiao. Chu Luiyue looked in the direction of the voice. The one who spoke was a well-built, dark-skinned young man. His face was filled with nervousness and apprehension, but he could not hide the excitement in his eyes. Being able to ascend the Ascension rankings was the greatest affirmation of a student's strength. There were a lot of people who had set this as their goal. They would constantly work hard and cultivate diligently, hoping that they would one day be able to make it onto the rankings. Of course, even those who were on the list did not dare to relax in the slightest. Because they were at risk of being squeezed out at any time. Just like now, once someone was on the list, at the beginning of every month, someone would issue a challenge to them. After all, so long as there weren't any special circumstances, the people on the Ascension rankings couldn't refuse the challenge at the beginning of the month. Otherwise, it would be seen as admitting defeat. Of course, if a few people wanted to challenge the same person at the same time, then the strongest would be determined from these few people, and the strongest would fight the person on the Ascension rankings in the end. On the other hand, most of the people on the Ascension rankings wanted to move up a rank. Therefore, those with lower rankings would also challenge those with higher rankings. However, for the past few years, no one had attempted to challenge the top 3 on the warrior ranking. The few people ranked below these 3 people often swapped their rankings, and their strength was almost equal. But it was as if they had an agreement, and no one took the initiative to challenge those higher up. Not to mention Rong Xiu, who was ranked first, or that mysterious person whose name had been erased from the second place. No one dared to challenge even the third place. Even the person ranked third was still in the academy until now. In short, the names at the top of the list were like mountains. Countless people wanted to climb and surpass them, but the truth was that even looking up at them was very difficult. Even those who had hopes of surpassing them didn't dare to casually make a move, let alone the others below. Li Ziming and Sun Zhao's challenge began very quickly. Subsequently, other people started to challenge one after another. Qingming Square was very large, and it was more than enough to accommodate all these people competing at the same time. In addition, there were elders at the side controlling the scene, so there was even less to worry. The challenge for Xian Masters also began very quickly. In comparison, the Celestial Physician's side was much more deserted. On one hand, there were very few Celestial Physician. On the other hand, everyone had a rough understanding of each other's strength during pill gambling. If they weren't certain of winning, they basically wouldn't challenge. After a long while, only a dozen people from the Celestial Physician side stood up to challenge. As for the Weapon Refinement Masters, there was even less to say. Chu Luiyue didn't have any doubts. As long as they had a bit of talent in weapon refinement, they could be on the list. Chu Yu. Come. Observe and learn more. In another 2 or 3 months, it'll be your turn. Elder Wanjing called out. Chu Luiyue walked back and stood at the side obediently. There were a total of 8 pill refining competitions going on at the same time in front of them. Chu Luiyue even found a few of them familiar. She had indeed gotten to know many people during pill gambling on various mountains in the academy these few days. Kid, who do you think will win that round? Elder Wanjing raised his chin and asked softly. Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered slightly. Master, Are you going to bet with me? Elder Wanzheng was speechless. Is this kid crazy about earning points? However, when he saw the serious expression on the young man's face, Elder Wanzheng realized that he wasn't joking. He seems to really want to earn points. You've just come to the academy. You'll have plenty of time to earn points in the future. Why are you in such a hurry? I'm just asking for your opinion. Before Elder Wanzheng could finish his words, he saw the young man smiling slightly. Master, the academy only stipulates that we can't gamble at the end of the month. There's no rule about the beginning of the month, right? Elder Wanzheng's eyelids twitched. I heard that every time it's this time, there will be some people who will start betting. To be honest, there are already a few people who came to ask for my opinion today. Chu Luiyue looked troubled. Tell me, should I say it or not? I'll give you the points later. Elder Wanzheng couldn't help but shout. Why didn't I notice that this kid knows how to play such a trick? He looks obedient and sensible, but now it seems that he's different from what I expected. Chu Luiyue then smiled in satisfaction. Her eyes curved into crescents, and her starry eyes sparkled. I knew Master is the best. However, this smile made Elder Wanzheng's eyelids twitch violently. Why do I feel like I've been cheated? And this feeling is strangely familiar. However, before he could think about it carefully, Chu Luiyue had already turned her head to look at the arena. She crossed her arms and gently rubbed her chin with one hand as if she was deep in thought. I think this round should be. Under the sunlight, the young man's delicate face looked innocent and harmless. When he was thinking seriously, he was exceptionally quiet and there was a special aura around him. Elder Wanzheng thought to himself that he was overthinking. At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from the sky. Rongxiu! Do you dare to fight? Chapter 1131. His voice was like a sudden clap of thunder. It was earth-shattering. Everyone looked up in shock when they heard that. Someone wanted to challenge Rongxiu. When they saw who it was, the elders all revealed a look of understanding. It was him, then it wasn't strange anymore. Some of the older students recognized him and exclaimed. Shuli. He's out of seclusion. Many of them came back to their senses. Shuli. The one who ranked third on the warrior leaderboard. That's him. He hasn't come out for a long time. I heard that he's been cultivating in seclusion. I didn't expect him to appear today. What's so strange about that? Didn't you hear that he's here to challenge Rongxiu? I'm afraid there's going to be a good show. Shuli stood in the air with a silver spear in his hand. On the silver spear, there were several blue lines intertwined and gathered at the tip, forming a sharp blue spearhead. From afar, it looked like a silver-blue dragon with a heavy aura. He was dressed in black, and his figure was tall and straight. His face was angular and his skin was wheat-colored. His pair of long and narrow eyes were as sharp as blades. If one looked into his eyes, his gaze seemed to be able to pierce through one's heart and look into the depths of one's heart. At that moment, his gaze was fixed on Rongxiu, who was standing on the Donghuang Bell Tower. Although he was expressionless, there was an undisguised fighting spirit in the depths of his eyes. Everyone could feel that he was eager to fight with Rongxiu. The aura on his body seemed to be sharper than the silver spear. Some people were born to fight. Shuli was obviously such a person. Everything that was present was not important to him. At that moment, there was only one thought in his mind: defeat Rongxiu. Countless pairs of eyes looked at Rongxiu. Curiosity, surprise, anticipation, nervousness. Obviously, everyone wanted to see Rongxiu's reaction. Besides that, they wanted to witness exactly how strong Rongxiu, who was ranked at the top of the Ascension rankings, was. One had to know that Rongxiu had not been in the academy for many years. Now that he had suddenly appeared, everyone naturally wanted to see for themselves if he was as powerful as the rumors said. However, Elder Bo Yen was the first to speak. Surely, Rongxiu came back this time because he has something else to deal with. It's not, I accept your challenge. Before Elder Bo Yen could finish his words, he was interrupted by Rongxiu. On his noble and enchanting face, there was a carefree expression, and the corners of his eyes and brows seemed to hold a faint smile, as if he didn't take this matter to heart. Elder Bo Yen hesitated for a moment. Rongxiu, aren't you busy? It won't take long. Rongxiu said with a faint smile. How arrogant. Such a thought flashed through everyone's minds. Wasn't he implying that he didn't need much time and energy to deal with Yin Shuli? He didn't take Yin Shuli seriously at all. However, even if Yin Shuli's ranking was lower than his on the Ascension rankings, he was still ranked third. Excluding the name that had mysteriously disappeared in the middle, the two of them were actually only one place apart. Moreover, Yin Shuli had been diligently cultivating in the academy for the past few years. It was rumored that his strength was almost comparable to some of the elders. However, he usually didn't come out and kept a low profile, so no one was very familiar with him. However, Rongxiu actually said that in public. Wasn't he too arrogant? However, there was no anger on Yin Shuli's face. Instead, the battle intent in his eyes burned brighter. All right. Then let's see who's stronger. Swoosh. With a flick of his wrist, the silver spear drew a beautiful arc in the air and pointed directly at Rongxiu. Please. Chu Luiyue watched the scene from below. In fact, she was also very curious about how powerful Rongxiu was. The two of them had sparred many times before, but she could clearly feel that Rongxiu had suppressed his strength to a level that was only slightly higher than hers. This way, she thought that she had a chance of winning every time, but unfortunately, she was always a little short. It was easy to imagine how terrifying a person who could control his own strength so perfectly was. At this moment, Rongxiu's figure flashed and appeared in front of Yin Shuli. The two of them faced each other from a distance. For some reason, the huge Qingming Square suddenly fell silent. The atmosphere instantly became tense. It's been a long time since I've seen Rongxiu fight. The people standing on the Donghuang Bell Tower also looked over. A young lady looked at the scene in the air in a daze and muttered softly. The last time I saw him fight, it was with... She suddenly stopped talking as she thought of something. Rongxiu rarely sparred with others. Those who tried to challenge him basically gave up after sparring with him once and never sparred with him again. Only this Yin Shuli didn't give up. From this perspective, his courage is commendable. A young man at the side laughed. Counting carefully, this is already the 5th time Yin Shuli has challenged him, right? Rongxiu found it strange that he actually agreed to it. In their opinion, Rongxiu didn't have the patience and thought to agree to multiple challenges from the same person. Ha! Other than the first time, didn't Rongxiu intentionally agree to his challenge and fight him 3 times in a row because Yin Shuli beat up that person? As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. The surrounding people looked at the young man who spoke with a strange expression. Only then did the young man realize that he had said something wrong. He sucked in a breath of cold air and quickly covered his mouth. At the same time, he looked at Elder Bo Yen and the others with a panicked expression. Perhaps it was because they were still a distance away, or perhaps the elders weren't paying attention, but they didn't seem to have any reaction. Phew, the young man let out a long sigh, but there was still a lingering fear in his heart. He actually forgot about this taboo. Humph, you can't say that. Wei Shiping suddenly said coldly and broke the dead silence. I heard that Rongxiu has been very busy these few years. Even the time he spent in the Yuntian Tower was very short. I don't know what he did, but I don't think he's focused on cultivation. On the other hand, Yin Shuli has been diligently cultivating. There might be a gap between the two of them before, but now, it's still unknown who's stronger. Digression: after running around outside for a whole day yesterday, he was completely crippled. Update continues at 6 p.m. Chapter 1132. Rong Xiu's talent was strong. A few years ago in the academy, he had always been stronger than them. However, if he neglected his cultivation, it would be impossible for him to regain his past glory after a few years, right? Other things aside, Yin Shuli was a lunatic when it came to fighting. With his current strength, he might really win against Rong Xiu. When the others heard this, they all had different expressions. They didn't say anything more and looked at the two people in the sky who were facing each other in the distance. Yin Shuli looked at Rong Xiu's empty hands and frowned. His originally expressionless face seemed even sharper. "Where's your yuan instrument?" Rong Xiu shook his head. "I don't need those." Yin Shuli's expression turned cold. "Looks like you're very confident in yourself." "Rong Xiu, I've been cultivating hard for the past 3 years just for this day. Today, I'll give it my all. I'll defeat you." A few years ago, after losing to Rong Xiu several times, Yin Shuli developed a strong fighting spirit against Rong Xiu. He had been waiting for an opportunity to turn the tables. However, Rong Xiu left the academy not long after that and did not come back for the past 3 years. This caused him to not have a chance to fight Rong Xiu officially. This time, after knowing that Rong Xiu had returned, he immediately rushed over. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. "Please." Yin Shuli narrowed his eyes and the aura around him surged. "A god-level expert." Exclamations came from the crowd. Judging by this aura, he must have broken through the demigod level and become a supreme god. Once a supreme god becomes a supreme god. But he's only 25 years old now, right? As expected of the martial artist ranked 3rd on the Green Cloud leaderboard. I wonder how powerful Rong Xiu is now. I heard that when he left the academy 3 years ago, he was already a supreme god. Now, the discussion from below entered Yin Shuli's ears and made him even more eager to fight. Whoosh! With a wave of his arm, the silver spear in his hand suddenly pierced forward. Obsidian lightning spear. Chi! When he poured his origin power into the silver spear, the dark blue lines on the spear's body seemed to come alive and began to dance wildly. A terrifying pressure spread out in all directions with him as the center. The sound of thunder rang out. Yin Shuli's figure flashed, and he had already charged in front of Rong Xiu in a blink of an eye. A spear thrust forward. No one could even see how he moved. Teleport. Chu Luyuan narrowed his eyes. Above ranked 9 warriors were demigods, and above demigods were high gods. Only when a cultivator broke through to the high god level would they be considered a true god level expert. Only when a cultivator reached this level would they be able to teleport without any external help. The distance of teleportation was different depending on the strength of each person. In a real battle, this move was very crucial. However, Rong Xiu did not seem to be worried about this situation. In fact, when Yin Shuli appeared 3 steps away from him, his expression was still as calm as before. It was as if he had expected this. Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly skipped a beat. At this moment, Rong Xiu finally moved. He raised his right hand, reached forward, and grabbed the tip of the spear. Ah! Cries of surprise could be heard from the crowd. Many of the ladies looked nervous. Wei Shiping sneered. Pretentious fool. Yin Shuli's obsidian lightning spear was a true high-grade divine weapon. Rong Xiu's futile attempt to block it with his physical body was simply a pipe dream. People who were too arrogant would always pay the price for their arrogance. However, at this moment, Yin Shuli's expression suddenly changed. This was because he realized that the invincible obsidian lightning spear was easily blocked by Rong Xiao and could not move forward. Even the sharp tip of the spear did not hurt Rong Xiao. Both sides were in a stalemate. Yin Shuli's expression turned serious as he poured more force into the obsidian lightning spear. However, it still did not move an inch. At this moment, the crowd below finally realized that something was wrong. Logically speaking, Rong Xiao's hand should have been pierced through, but now, Yin Shuli suddenly thought of something and widened his eyes as he looked at Rong Xiao in disbelief. "You've already cultivated to the level of a god, crack." Before he could finish his sentence, Rong Xiao's hand suddenly clenched. The faint blue light flickered, but it did not seem to affect Rong Xiao at all. He decisively pulled and whipped out. Just like that, the obsidian lightning spear was released from Yin Shuli's control. Swoosh! Before the crowd could see it clearly, they could only hear the sharp sound of wind breaking. The next moment, the scene in the sky shocked them. The obsidian lightning spear had somehow fallen into Rong Xiao's hands. The terrifyingly sharp tip of the spear was pointed at Yin Shuli's chest. It was as if he could pierce Yin Shuli's heart if he moved an inch closer. The entire place was silent. Everyone was stunned as they watched the scene unfold before them. They did not know how to react. Rong Xiao had taken Yin Shuli's yuan instrument and turned the tables to attack, forcing Yin Shuli to a dead end. He only used one move. The crowd did not even know if this was considered one move. They did not even see Rong Xiao unleash his force. All they saw was a blur, and the two of them were completely reversed. Rong Xiao lifted his chin slightly, his face still wearing the same casual smile. However, at this moment, there was an inexplicable pressure in the crowd's eyes. "Do you want me to continue?" Rong Xiao's thin lips moved slightly as he said calmly. Yin Shuli's body tensed up. He could even feel that the cold and sharp tip of the spear had already pierced through his clothes and was firmly pressed against his chest. A sharp pain came from above. He did not need to look down to know that his chest was bleeding. If it went deeper, he would be dead on the spot. Looking at those unfathomable eyes, Yin Shuli did not doubt that Rong Xiao was capable of doing such a thing. He pursed his lips, his face pale. After a while, he let out a long sigh. "I admit defeat." Whoosh, the crowd below was in an uproar. He admitted defeat. Yin Shuli admitted defeat just like that. According to his combative nature, it was extremely difficult for him to admit defeat so easily. At the same time, it also meant that he was helpless against Rong Xiao's counterattack. His yuan instrument had been taken away, and it was pressed against his chest. Anyone would have to admit defeat, right? Everything happened too quickly. Everyone was looking forward to an exciting fight, but Rong Xiao did not give them such a chance. The crowd standing on the Donghuang Bell Tower was also shocked. Rong Xiao has actually become so strong. Wei Shiping, didn't you just say that Yin Shuli could defeat Rong Xiao? What do you think now? The surrounding people looked at Wei Shiping at the same time. Chapter 1133. Wei Shiping was shocked at first, but when he came back to his senses, his expression darkened. He gritted his teeth and said nothing, but the aura around him turned cold. He clenched his fists under his sleeves. Rong Xiao, he did not waste his time in the past few years. Instead, he grew stronger. How did he do it? Wei Shiping was not the only one who was curious about this. Yin Shuli wanted to know more. His eyes were fixed on Rong Xiao as he enunciated each word clearly. "You've already, not yet." Rong Xiao seemed to have expected him to say something. He smirked and tossed the obsidian lightning spear back. But it's enough to deal with you. Shuli grabbed the spear and looked at Rong Xiu with a frown. His emotions were complicated. He suspected that Rong Xiu had already cultivated a divine body. But if Rong Xiu said he did not, then it should be true. But judging from the situation just now, it seemed like that was the case. There was no doubt that the gap between the two of them had widened again. Shuli thought that he could close the gap between him and Rong Xiu with his hard work over the past few years. He might even surpass him. But he did not expect that Rong Xiu would improve even faster than him. He gripped the obsidian lightning spear tightly and looked down. There was already a smear of blood on his chest. If Rong Xiu wanted to, he could take Shuli's life right away. Shuli took a deep breath. When he looked up at Rong Xiu again, the shock and defeat in his eyes had disappeared. I admit that I'm not as strong as you today. I admit defeat. But one day, I'll beat you. Rong Xiu raised an eyebrow. Shuli would say this every time he lost. He was already used to it. But he would not give Shuli the chance to do so. The battle between the two in the sky had ended, but the spectators were still in a daze. That's it. From the beginning to the end, the two of them had only exchanged one move. The entire process was so simple and straightforward that it made one's hair stand on end. But the more it was like this, the more it proved Rong Xiu's strength. No one doubted that Shuli was not strong enough. Among the top 3 on the warrior roll, he was the only one who had stayed in the academy for the past few years. Even so, no one dared to challenge him. How could it be so easy to defeat a 25-year-old high god? In the eyes of many students, Shuli was the synonym of a genius and an expert. It was within sight but out of reach. However, such a person could not even withstand one move from Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's strength was unimaginable. Senior brother Rong Xiu is indeed powerful. He actually agreed to senior brother Shuli's request so easily. There have long been rumors that he is the top genius of the academy over the years. It is not an exaggeration to say that he is a legendary existence. At first, I thought it was an exaggeration. Who knew? After seeing it with my own eyes, I realized that it was all true. It is a pity that senior brother Rong Xiu has not been in the academy for the past few years. It is difficult to even meet him. This time, he should not be staying for too long. For such a man, I wonder what kind of woman would be able to enter his eyes. Do you still need to ask? Of course, it is Jiang Ji1. The immortal water mausoleum where she is from is the strongest tribe under the Yuntian Tower. Moreover, the two of them have known each other for a long time. They can be considered childhood sweethearts. Don't you know? Not long ago, senior brother Rong Xiu just got married to a princess. What? I heard that the princess is an outsider. Anyway, Jiang Ji1 has nothing to do with it, many of the girls were discussing in low voices. There were also some who were quietly searching for Jiang Ji1's figure. Those gazes landed on Jiang Ji1, making her feel uneasy. She did not know how much effort she had to expend to resist the urge to turn around and run away. When she came to the academy, Rong Xiu had coincidentally left the academy. The two of them did not spend time together at the academy. But in reality, other than the freshmen who had just arrived, more than half of Lingxiao College's students knew that she liked Rong Xiu. Among them, there were some who added fuel to the fire. Of course, she also did it on purpose. Jiang Ji1 was beautiful and had outstanding talent. Naturally, she was like the moon surrounded by stars in the academy. Many of her seniors and juniors had a good impression of her and had even pursued her passionately. But they were all rejected by Jiang Ji1. At first, no one knew why she did so. But later on, there was news that although she was born in the Immortal Water Mausoleum, she was favored by the Yuntian Tower's tribe leader. Therefore, she grew up there. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was the spoiled eldest daughter of the Yuntian Tower. Because of this, everyone naturally associated her with Rongxiu. Some people came to her in private to ask about it. Jiang Jiwan did not admit it, but she did not deny it either. Thus, gradually, everyone knew about this matter. Many people silently agreed that Jiang Jiwan and Rongxiu would be together. But who would have thought that in the end, another woman would suddenly appear and become Rongxiu's princess consort? Now, there were those who sympathized with Jiang Jiwan, those who mocked her, and those who wanted to see her make a fool of herself. How could Jiang Jiwan not know that? So at this moment, those eyes and comments made her feel even more uncomfortable. She wanted to leave, but she could not bear to. So, she could only stand there and suffer. Chu Luiyue also heard such comments. He raised his eyebrows slightly, feeling a little strange. Rongxiu could be considered a celebrity in Lingxiao College. Chu Yu. Chu Yu. A familiar voice suddenly sounded. Chu Luiyue turned his head and was surprised to see who it was. Miss Luo. Why are you here? She should be with the martial artists. Why did she come to the celestial physician's side? You are here to see me? Chu Luiyue asked tentatively. Luo Shishi's cheeks were slightly red, and her eyes were bright as she looked at Chu Luiyue. Yes. I'm here to congratulate you. Congratulations on becoming Elder Wanzhang's disciple. I heard that Elder Wanzhang has high standards. You're the only one who has succeeded in the past few years. So it's really about this. Chu Luiyue smiled. Thank you. Congratulations to you too. Your master seems to be Elder Wenxi, right? Yes. Luo Shishi nodded, obviously very happy. Elder Wenxi was one of the top elders in the academy, and he had a good personality. Luo Shishi felt very lucky to be able to become his student. Brother Sheng is the same as me, following Elder Wenxi. As for fifth brother, he followed Elder Huafeng. Originally, he wanted to follow seventh madam like fourth brother. However, seventh madam has already recruited quite a number of students, so fifth brother still chose Elder Huafeng. Actually, the strength of these two elders was not much different. As long as one cultivated diligently, there would not be much difference. Chu Luiyue smiled. That's great. Congratulations to you guys too. The young man's smile was gentle, and his eyes were delicate and pretty. This smile seemed to make everything around him lose its color. Luo Shishi was momentarily absent-minded, and then for some reason, her face turned slightly red. We said we were going to celebrate tonight. Are you coming? When Rongxiu looked down, he saw this scene. The handsome youth and the pretty girl stood opposite each other. The girl's face was slightly red, and her eyes were bright with shyness and joy. As for the youth, he lowered his eyes slightly, as if he was thinking about something. Then, he raised his eyes and smiled brightly at the girl. Rongxiu's brows moved slightly, and he smiled faintly, but his eyes were covered with a thin layer of frost. He had just arrived, and he already had an appointment with a girl. Chapter 1134. Sure. Chu Luiyue said with a smile. As a newcomer, she was not familiar with many people in the academy. It was probably because they had all entered on the same day and had passed the assessment at the beginning of the month. They had officially become Lingxiao College's students, so it was rare for them to be close to each other. Even though Zhuxing wasn't very polite to her at the start, Chu Luiyue realized that he didn't have any bad intentions after they got familiar with each other. He was just a little hot-tempered and a little careless. In fact, these people's characters were not bad. In addition, Chu Luiyue already knew that they were from Mingxia Ci's Luo family, a real first-class family. Even compared to Yuntian Tower, it was not inferior. It was quite rare to come from such a big family and not have an arrogant temperament. Chu Luiyue wanted to make friends with them, so she agreed to Luo Shishir's invitation. Hearing Chu Luiyue's affirmative answer, Luo Shishir was very happy. Then let's meet at Thousand Wine Mountain tonight. Thousand Wine Mountain was a mountain peak in Lingxiao College. It was at the intersection of the Celestial Physician and the Weapon Refiner School in the northwest. It was called this because there was a very magical spring on Thousand Wine Mountain. The water that gushed out of the spring naturally had the fragrance of wine. When drunk, it tasted very similar to wine, but it was not intoxicating. Therefore, the students in the academy liked to go there. It could be considered a popular place for students to relax in the academy. Chu Luiyue naturally nodded in agreement. Okay. After receiving Chu Luiyue's affirmative answer, Luo Shishir secretly sighed in relief and felt a little happy at the same time. She did not know why, but when Chu was 3 years younger than her, she always felt inexplicably nervous when standing in front of him. He seemed to have an innate noble aura that made people not dare to slight him. Sensing the substantial gaze from the sky, Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly and looked up. Sensing her gaze, Luo Shishir also looked over. Senior Rongxiu is very powerful. She praised from the bottom of her heart. It would be great if I could have the chance to fight him once. Chu Luiyue glanced back at her with a smile on his face. Why? Do you like Rongxiu too? This also was naturally in comparison to the infatuated women around him. Luo Shishir quickly shook her head in denial. How could this be? I just feel that he's very powerful. After all, he's an existence that can continuously dominate the rankings for several years. All the students in the academy should want to reach the same height as him, right? With Yin Shuli as an example, Luo Shishir didn't even dare to say that she could surpass Rongxiu. As it turned out, it was difficult for them to even catch up to him. And senior brother Rongxiu already has a consort. Perhaps it was because of the inexplicable nervousness in her heart, Luo Shishir didn't notice that when the young man in front of her mentioned Rongxiu, he didn't say the word senior brother. His tone and attitude were also very calm and natural. It was completely different from the way the other students in the academy treated Rongxiu with respect, envy, or jealousy. That's true. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. At the very least, she really wanted to fight with him now. Chu Luiyue and Luo Shishir stood together and talked. From above, it looked like the two of them were chatting happily together. Rongxiu. Elder Bo Yen shouted twice before Rongxiu came back to his senses. What are you looking at? Rongxiu calmly retracted his gaze and smiled faintly. Nothing. With that, he flew back to the Donghuang Bell Tower. Yin Shuli said, "We'll fight another day." Then, he quickly turned and left. No one stopped him. No one would be able to stay after being defeated so badly in front of everyone. Moreover, Yin Shuli had been waiting for this battle for a long time. Without a doubt, this was a huge blow to him. However, Yin Shuli had a good point. The more he was defeated, the braver he became. If others lost, it was inevitable that they would be sad and frustrated. If it happened too many times, or if the situation was more serious, they might not be able to recover. However, Yin Shuli would never have such a problem. This defeat only served to ignite his fighting spirit even more. From this point of view, his belligerent personality was also beneficial. The match started abruptly and ended in an even more unexpected manner. Before the crowd could react, it was already over. Many people were still unsatisfied. Sigh, what a pity. I thought I would be able to watch an exciting battle. I didn't expect. He defeated his opponent with one move, and it was against Yin Shuli. In the entire academy, I'm afraid only senior brother Rong Xiao can do this, right? I wanted to take the opportunity to observe, but now it looks like I won't be able to. If only I came to the academy a few years earlier, I might have been able to watch more of senior brother Rong Xiao's battles. Haha. You're thinking too much. Who in Lingxiao Academy doesn't know that senior brother Rong Xiao never fights a second round with anyone? Hearing the discussions below, the people standing on the Dongwang Bell Tower secretly exchanged looks of tacit understanding and smiled. To most people, Rong Xiao indeed did not have the patience to fight a second round with someone he had defeated. However, Yin Shuli was not the only exception. There was only one person who made Rong Xiao make an exception from the beginning to the end. The two of them would have a friendly spar every few days, and no one knew how many times they had fought. In the beginning, that person always lost. However, Rong Xiao seemed to have infinite patience and tolerance for the other party, and almost gave in to all of his requests. However, that was a long time ago. Not long after that person left the academy, or rather, disappeared, Rong Xiao returned to the Yuntian Tower and rarely came to the academy. Naturally, he did not have the chance to see the various scenes from the past. Why, do you have a junior brother or junior sister that you like? Elder Bo Yen asked jokingly. Rong Xiao pondered for a moment, then nodded seriously. There's one, and it's not bad. Oh. Elder Bo Yen originally came to tease, but when he heard Rong Xiao's words, he could not help but be surprised. He looked down. Which one is it? Rong Xiao smiled. You already know, so why ask? Elder Bo Yen widened his eyes slightly. It's really Chu Yu. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly and nodded. He is quite good at celestial physician. That's true. After Elder Bo Yen recovered from his shock, he quickly accepted Rong Xiao's words. That child is indeed not bad. Otherwise, he would not have caught Elder Wanzhang's eye. Although he could not be compared to that person back then, there were some similarities. Elder Bo Yen looked carefully at the young man standing below, stroking his beard and saying seriously, this young man is a genius. If he is properly groomed in the future, he will definitely have a bright future. Chapter 1135. Bo Yen, you think so too? Just then, Elder Wensi appeared out of nowhere and chuckled as he reminded them proudly. That child, I recruited him. When I saw him a few days ago, I felt that his talent was amazing and he was obedient. He would definitely do well in the future. What do you think? My eyes are good, right? Sigh, the only pity is that this child went to cultivate celestial physician. If he was a martial artist, TSK, Elder Wensi was happy and regretful at the same time. He was happy that such an outstanding new student was recruited by him. It was a pity that this child could not cultivate with him. Elder Wanzhang, that old bastard, had taken advantage of him for nothing. Wanzhang owes me a big favor this time. Elder Wensi said confidently. Rong Xiao looked at him with a strange expression. It was not certain who owed who, didn't you also take in a few students? One of them seems to be a direct descendant of Mingsha Xi's Luo family. Elder Bo Yen smiled. Isn't that enough? Elder Wensi coughed. Isn't this, the more the better? The more the better. Rong Xiao looked down again before slowly bidding farewell to everyone. Elder Bo Yen, I still need to go back and prepare for the matter we talked about earlier, so I won't stay any longer. The elders were not surprised that Rong Xiao wanted to leave. It was already rare that he was willing to show up. Moreover, he had just fought with Yin Shuli. All right. I'll send someone, thank you for your kindness, Elder Bo Yen, but there's no need for that for now. Rong Xiao smiled. Although I haven't returned for a few years, this student is still very familiar with the academy. It was rare for Elder Bo Yen to hear him refer to himself like this. He felt rather emotional and nodded. All right, then. I'll leave it to you. Rong Xiao left quickly. Seeing his figure disappear, many people were disappointed. However, they also knew that Rong Xiao was no longer in the academy. It was already very difficult to meet him, so they didn't dare to ask for more. Wei Shiping and the others also left not long after he left. Only the elders were left on the Donghuang Bell Tower. Meanwhile, the competition on the Qingming Square was still in full swing. As the competition progressed, the rankings on the Ascension rankings gradually changed as well. Those who successfully made it onto the list naturally cheered, while those who unfortunately failed were disappointed. The competition for the rankings was even more intense. Everyone was a genius from all over the world. Except for a few monstrous existences, most people's talents were actually about the same. Under such circumstances, the competition between the strong and the weak would be very intense. At this moment, Chu Luyue finally found out that the higher one's ranking was on the Ascension rankings, the longer one stayed on the rankings, and the more points one possessed. As for those who dominated the rankings, there was no need to even mention them. She thought about how she had painstakingly earned more than 20,000 points, and in the blink of an eye, 5,000 points were deducted. Chu Luyue was very heartbroken. The fastest way to earn points was to actually get onto the Ascension rankings. However, even if she was the celestial physician that she was most confident in, the 100th place was still at the peak of the 9th grade. If she wanted to defeat him, she had to at least be able to refine a pill of the same grade. Chu Luyue was a little troubled. Chu Yu, what are you thinking about? Luo Shishir asked. Chu Luyue gently rubbed her chin with one hand. I'm thinking. How to get onto the Ascension rankings. Luo Shishir couldn't help but laugh out loud. You're already thinking about this problem. Isn't it? A little early. I'm thinking that it's better to be a little stronger and have a little more confidence to succeed in one go. What do you think? These words were already rather tactful, as if she didn't want to dampen Chu Luyue's enthusiasm. She added another sentence. According to your talent, it shouldn't take long, right? Chu Luyue's eyes flickered as she smiled. You're right. This kind of thing can't be rushed. Since it was so difficult to get onto the Celestial Physician ranking, the competition for the other two rankings would only be even more intense. Among these rankings, only the Weapon Refiner ranking with less than 100 people would have the least competition, right? Weapon Refiner. Chu Liyue's eyes suddenly lit up as she looked towards the north. If she could display her talent as a weapon refiner, then she might be able to get onto the rankings directly. Thinking about it carefully, she had actually forged yuan tools before. Back then, the cloud sky copper sword that Chang Wanzhou used was sharpened by her. Although it wasn't considered a complete weapon refiner, but maybe she could really give it a try. Thinking of this, Chu Luyue walked towards the direction of the weapon refiner. Hearing Chu Luyue's footsteps, Elder Ren Ran, who was standing under the weapon refiner ranking drowsily, opened one of his eyes. Oh, it's still that freshman who was casually strolling around. I think he's the one who became Wan Zhang's disciple. Then, Elder Ren Ran saw the young man walking straight towards him and standing in front of him. Greetings, Elder. Elder Ren Ran opened his second eye and said lazily, what are you doing? If an ordinary person saw him for the first time, they would definitely think that he was arrogant and rude. But in fact, those who were familiar with Elder Ren Ran, or rather, those who were familiar with the temperament of the weapon refiners, would know that this was already a very polite situation. And it was still because of Elder Wan Zhang. Chu Luyue didn't mind. She bowed respectfully and asked, I want to get onto the weapon refiner ranking. Elder Ren reacted for a moment before standing up straight. He sized up Chu Luiyue from head to toe and suddenly laughed. I couldn't tell, but you have a treasure on you. It was rare to see an origin tool that could avoid his detection and completely conceal the aura on its body. Kid, what rank are you now? Chu Luiyue paused and said honestly, I'm at the early stage of the 7th rank. She should be able to break through to the middle stage of the 7th rank soon. But she didn't say that. What? Early stage of the 7th rank? Elder Ren widened his eyes in surprise, then slapped his thigh and laughed out loud. Ha 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 ha. You brat, you're really a newborn calf who isn't afraid of tigers. Do you know that to get onto the weapon refiner ranking, you have to at least be a demigod? You're still far from being a rank 7 warrior. Elder Ren's laughter immediately attracted the attention of many people. After hearing his words, everyone's eyes turned to Chu Luiyue. What else did they not understand? This brat who just entered the school wanted to get onto the weapon refiner ranking with his strength as a rank 7 warrior. It was simply a fantasy. He didn't even know the minimum requirements to be on the ranking. Wasn't he too naive? Kid, it's a good thing to get onto the Azure Cloud ranking. However, you have to see if you have the ability to do so. You should go back and wash up before sleeping. Chapter 1136. As Elder Ren spoke, he was about to close his eyes again. Elder, this student has something to ask of you. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised by his words, but she didn't give up immediately. After pondering for a moment, she still spoke. She wasn't a demigod. But she had a strand of divine power in her body. More importantly, she had already forged the Cloud Sky Copper Sword a long time ago. Although the Tianlei at that time was attracted by the Taizu, but she was indeed the one who cleaned up the Tianlei later on. Elder Ren opened his eyes and looked at her lazily. Speak. If a person's strength hasn't reached the demigod level, then is there really no way to determine if he has talent in refining? Why are you so obsessed with this? Elder Ren laughed and looked at her as if he was looking at an ignorant child who was throwing a tantrum. He pointed to the side. If you really want to be on the Qingyun leaderboard, go back and study alchemy properly. Perhaps you can get there faster. You should give up on being a refiner. Elder Ren didn't feel that it was useful to say so much to a young man who had just reached the 7th rank. In his opinion, Chu Luiyue was acting like this because of novelty. But in reality, how could it be so easy to be a refiner? Many cultivators who had reached the demigod level couldn't even touch the edge of being a refiner, let alone a child like this. Chu Luiyue paused. I heard that refiners use the power of Tianlei to forge yuan tools. If this student can do it, can I also be considered a refiner? Of course, what? Elder Ren choked and looked at Chu Luiyue with a bewildered expression. What did you just say? You can trigger Tianlei to forge yuan tools. Chu Luiyue blinked and nodded slightly. Impossible. This is impossible. Unless, Elder Ren suddenly paused. You have contracted a divine beast. To Elder Ren, there was only one possibility to be able to trigger Tianlei without reaching the demigod level. It meant that a cultivator had contracted a divine beast. When a human formed a contract with a divine beast, a wisp of heavenly energy that originally belonged to the divine beast would enter the cultivator's body. Relying on this, it was not impossible to trigger the heavenly lightning. Chu Luiyue's eyes flashed as he nodded. Yes. Seeing that Chu Luiyue was so insistent, Elder Ren had no other choice but to mutter, if that's the case, I can give it a try. However, if you get hurt later, this old man won't be responsible. Chu Luiyue chuckled. Thank you, Elder. Chu Yu, what are you doing? Luo Shishi walked over, her eyes filled with confusion. You want to enter the weapon refiner ranking. Why did he come to the blacksmith ranking instead of the celestial physician ranking? Chu Luiyue nodded with an indifferent expression. Luo Shishir wanted to persuade him, but for some reason, when she saw the young man's calm appearance, the words stuck in her throat suddenly couldn't leave her mouth. She hesitated for a moment and stood aside. At this time, most people's attention was still on the other three rankings. Although some people noticed the situation here, they didn't take it to heart. How many years had it been since the Armament Master Leaderboard had any movement, and a new student who had just joined the academy, could he really create any waves? Elder Ren Ran took out a fist-sized green jade stone. This is the Illusion God Pearl. There are several Tianlei stored in it. As long as you can summon it, you will succeed. The Armament Master's examination was relatively simple, because it was quite troublesome to take the blacksmith assessment on the spot. Therefore, most of the time, the elders would use this Illusion God Pearl to test the student's talent and potential. If one could trigger the Tianlei stored in it, it proved that one could become a blacksmith. According to the number of Tianlei summoned, the talent represented is different. Elder Ren Ran handed over the Illusion God Pearl. As long as you can summon one Tianlei, you will succeed. Girl, do you need my help? Taizu's voice rang out. Thank you, Taizu, but I'll do this assessment myself. Chu Luiyue said in her heart. On one hand, if Taizu made a move, they might be detected on the spot. On the other hand, she really wanted to see if she could do it. She took the Illusion God Pearl with both hands. The Illusion God Pearl was green, lustrous, translucent, and cold to the touch. Chu Luiyue stared at the Illusion God Pearl in her hand, took a deep breath, and focused. There were a total of 4 special powers in her body. 2 of the Heavenly Path's powers entered her body when she contracted with the 2 divine beasts. The other was gathered from Taizu's Tianling God realm. The last divine power was taken from the power left behind by Taizu in the northern underworld. The so-called divine power and the Heavenly Path's power came from the same source. Every divine beast was blessed by the Heavenly Path and was born between heaven and earth. They were inextricably linked to the Heavenly Path. The power in their bodies naturally contained a portion of the Heavenly Path's mysteries. In other words, they were born with the Heavenly Path's power. But it was different for humans. All cultivators would only have a chance to touch the Heavenly Path after they had completely broken through to the God level and converted all their origin power into divine power. Only the top experts who had truly touched the Heavenly Path would have divine power that contained the Heavenly Path's might. Only at this level would humans have a chance to reach the same level as divine beasts. This was also why divine beasts were born proud and noble. Compared to all living things in the world, divine beasts were the most favored existence by the heavens. The divine power that Chu Luiyue took contained a trace of the Heavenly Path's aura. Although it was weak, perhaps because Taizu in the northern underworld was already a god-level expert when he left this power behind, it was more or less comparable to the Heavenly Path's power left behind by a demigod like Taizu. So, in summary, Chu Luiyue had 4 types of Heavenly Path's power in her body. If she wanted to trigger Tianlei, this should be enough. However, for safety's sake, Chu Luiyue still chose to use the Heavenly Path's power that she had obtained through the contract with Dumpling. A vigorous aura spread out from Chu Luiyue's dantian, and then surged toward her hands. Buzz! The Illusion God Pearl seemed to have sensed something, and let out a soft sound. At the same time, ripples appeared on its surface. The ripples gradually spread inwards. There seemed to be something surging inside the translucent green jade. Seeing this, Elder Ren Ran, who was originally dismissive of Chu Luiyue, straightened his back subconsciously, and the laziness in his eyes disappeared. Soon, a faint blue Tianlei flashed. Crack! Although this was a miniature version, because it was the real Tianlei, its might was still not to be underestimated. Elder Renran's face lit up. You're really, however, before he could finish his sentence, the Tianlei that had just been summoned seemed to have encountered something terrifying, and with a whoosh, it ran back and quickly disappeared. Chu Luiyue was confused. Chapter 1137. The scene was very awkward. Elder Renran rubbed his eyes hard, and only then did he confirm that the Tianlei and the illusion god Pearl had indeed disappeared completely. Then, he looked at Chu Luiyue strangely. Chu Luiyue looked up innocently and met his eyes. What happened just now? I don't know either. You don't know? That Tianlei clearly came out, but it went back. The illusion god Pearl is in your hands, and you don't know. Elder, you're very knowledgeable, so you should know better, right? But I've never seen such a situation before. Elder Renran held his forehead and felt a headache coming on. He was the one who took out the illusion god Pearl, but the one who tested it was Chu Yu. In the end, it was Chu Yu's problem. But he also seemed to be at a loss. Could it be that he really didn't know what was going on? Try again, Elder Renran said. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly and tried again. This time, she used the heavenly Tao power left behind when she made the contract with the three-eyed eagle. She held the illusion god Pearl with both hands. Soon, the same fluctuation was produced again. Elder Renran's heart was also in his mouth. As long as that Tianlei appeared long enough, it could be considered a success. At first, he didn't take the young man in front of him seriously, but now, after experiencing the scene just now, he vaguely felt that this Chu Yu might really have some talent. It was really not easy to recruit a disciple for the artificer school. Therefore, Elder Renran's originally indifferent attitude had also changed. He secretly had some expectations in his heart. I hope this young man can succeed. Crack! A bolt of heavenly thunder suddenly appeared. Elder Renran was delighted. But before he could smile, the bolt of heavenly lightning vanished once more. This time, it was even worse than the previous time. It only came out for a moment and then quickly retreated. It didn't even let others see what it looked like. Looking at the empty illusion god Pearl, Chu Luiyue and Elder Renran were silent for a moment. Elder Renran took a deep breath and looked up at her. Ha! I knew he couldn't do it. How can it be so easy to become an armament master? That's right. Even if you have some talent in celestial physician, you don't have to be so ostentatious, right? Could it be that you think you're an all-rounder like senior martial brother Rongsho? He's just a rank 7 warrior and he dares to challenge me like this. His courage is really commendable. Sounds of discussion came from behind. They were standing quite far away, so they couldn't see the lightning bolt that flashed across the illusion god Pearl. Hence, they thought that Chu Luiyue couldn't summon it at all. His words were filled with undisguised mockery and sarcasm. In the Spirit Firmament Academy, although the overall atmosphere was not bad, it did not mean that everyone was amiable in private. Chu Luiyue had performed very well in the Celestial Physician's examination. Some people were envious, and some were jealous. In the eyes of those people, her current behavior was nothing more than a meaningless show of strength. What are you talking about? Luo Shishir frowned and turned back to reprimand them. She was a noble lady carefully nurtured by an aristocratic family. Although she had a gentle temper, when she was angry, the invisible aura on her body was enough to shock people. Those students who were swept by her gaze shut their mouths. Even if they were unhappy, Luo Shishir was still a member of the Luo family, and they didn't dare to offend her. Moreover, there were several people in the Luo family, such as Luo Yanlin, who were quite reputable in the college. There was really no need to provoke them. Miss Luo, don't be angry over these trivial matters. Upon hearing this, Chu Luiyue turned around and smiled slightly. Luo Shishir pursed her lips. They said that about you, actually, they're not wrong. I don't seem to have any talent in this area. Chu Luiyue said as she returned the illusion god pearl. I don't seem to be compatible with this thing. This scene was actually not unfamiliar to her. It seemed to be the same when she was forging the Cloud Sky Copper Sword. It was just that the situation back then was much more intense and real than now. Although she felt that she could forcefully capture Tianlei back, she gave up considering that there were so many people watching. Elder Ren took the illusion god pearl and looked at it carefully. Finally, he looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated gaze. What a pity. Logically speaking, you're not completely without talent as a weapon refiner, but, however, it didn't seem to be enough, or there were other problems. In short, Chuyu failed to summon Tianlei. This test could only be considered a failure. Chu Luiyue didn't seem to be disappointed and only smiled faintly. I know. Sorry to trouble you. With that, she left without any reluctance. Sigh, Luo Shishir hurriedly followed and carefully looked at her expression, as if she wanted to say something but hesitated. Chu Luiyue smiled. Miss Luo, if you have something to say, just say it. Luo Shishir was stunned. We can be considered friends now. You can call me by my name. Miss Luo sounded too distant and polite. Chu Luiyue followed suit. Shishir. Luo Shishir's eyelashes trembled slightly, as if something was gently rubbing against her heart. Chu Luiyue didn't notice it. She recalled the situation just now and smiled. Don't worry, I'm fine. Elder Ren is right. It's not so easy to be a weapon refiner. I just wanted to give it a try and see if I have the potential in this area. If I do, it's naturally good. If I don't, there's nothing to feel bad about. After all. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, but her eyes were filled with confidence. My talent as a celestial physician is not bad. As she spoke, her gaze swept across the surrounding people. The people who were discussing her earlier became quieter. No matter what, she was the only disciple that Elder Wanjing had taken a fancy to in the past 3 years. Just this alone was enough to beat up countless people. What right did they have to ridicule her? Seeing that she didn't seem to feel bad about it, Luo Shishir heaved a sigh of relief. That's true. Lingxiao College has recruited countless students over the years, but less than 100 people can make it to the weapon refiner list. It's normal that you can't make it. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and her gaze fell on the name at the top of the list. She raised her eyebrows slightly. Well, this is enough to show how powerful the people who can make it to the list are. Luo Shishir followed her line of sight and smiled. Yes. If all of them are as powerful as senior brother Rong Xiu, how amazing would that be? Chu Luiyue didn't say anything else. At this moment, a familiar male voice suddenly came from not far away. Shishir. Luo Yanlin saw that his sister and the young man were standing together and seemed to be very close. He couldn't help but raise his voice. Come here. Chapter 1138. My fourth brother is calling me. I'm leaving now. See you tonight. Luo Shishir said softly to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Luo Shishir pursed her lips into a smile and turned to leave with light footsteps. For some reason, Chu Luiyue felt a faint chill envelop her. She looked over and realized that the faintly discernible threatening aura came from Luo Yanlin. Luo Yanlin seemed to be a little surprised by her sharp senses. A trace of astonishment flashed across his face and he immediately narrowed his eyes. The warning in his eyes was obvious. Chu Luiyue understood what he meant, but she was confused. Warning, Luo Yanlin was warning her for no reason. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind. Could it be because of Luo Shishir? Thinking about it carefully, she was with Luo Shishir just now. It might have been a misunderstanding. Chu Liuyue's eyes twitched. Luo Yanlin is thinking too much, isn't he? Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. If Luo Yanlin thinks this way, then Rong Xiu. She shook her head and suppressed these messy thoughts. Since I've officially become a student of Lingxiao College, it's most important to improve my strength as soon as possible. Besides, there's also Jun Jiuqing. A few days ago, Chu Luyue had already asked around and found out that Jun Jiuqing was considered an influential figure in the college. He was one of the top students in the college a few years ago. He had outstanding talent and improved at lightning speed. He once used only 3 months to climb from the bottom 10 to the top 20 of the Qingyun roll. This speed was heaven-defying. However, he only stayed in the college for a short period of time and left not long after. He never returned after that. As for his ranking, it slowly slid down in the following period of time, and now it was already in the 30s. However, many people still had a deep impression of him. This was because his master was a famous figure in the college, Elder Kulan. There were at least 180 elders in Lingxiao College. Elder Kulan was not the strongest among them, but he was still very famous. This was because he and the current dean were fellow disciples of the same sect. And their teacher was the previous dean of Lingxiao College. It was rumored that the dean had intended to choose between the two of them to inherit his position. He had always doted on his little disciple, Kulan. Everyone thought that this was his plan. However, he did not expect that in the end, he did not choose Kulan. Instead, he chose his eldest disciple, who was the current dean. Regarding this matter, everyone had different opinions. He also said that Kulan had done something wrong and angered the old principal, which was why she was stripped of her qualifications. There were also some who said that Kulan was framed and implicated innocently, which was why she was forced to hand over the position of dean to someone else. In short, no one could clearly explain what happened back then. However, the relationship between the dean and Elder Kulan seemed to be peaceful. As for the inside story, only they knew. However, it was also because of this that Elder Kulan's position in the academy was very special. All these years, he had only recruited 3 students. Jun Jiuqing was the 3rd one. Now, Jun Jiuqing did not seem to have returned to the academy. Chu Luyue could only temporarily suppress her thoughts and wait quietly. Since Jun Jiuqing wanted to use Chu Ning to threaten her, he would not dare to go too far. In this regard, Chu Luyue could somewhat be at ease. Now, all she could do was to raise her cultivation as quickly as possible while secretly searching for the truth. 4th brother, why are you looking for me? Luo Shishir returned to Luo Yanlin's side and asked. Luo Yanlin sized her up. When did you become so close to that Chuyu? Luo Shishir was stunned, and then her face turned slightly red. No, I just felt that since we entered the academy on the same day, it could be considered fate, so I thought that it would be good to be friends. Luo Yanlin's gaze was somewhat scrutinizing. However, seeing that his sister was slightly nervous, he could not bear to push her too hard, so he could only tactfully nod. That kid is somewhat talented in celestial physician, so it's fine to be friends. However, since you're already in the academy, your focus should still be on cultivation. Breaking through to the 9th rank is just the beginning for you. Only by being on the Azure Cloud leaderboard can our Luo family's reputation not be tarnished. Luo Shishir's expression became much more serious. 4th brother is right, Shishir will remember. That's good, go back and cultivate diligently. The lively examination at the beginning of the month finally came to an end in the evening. The qualified new students all had their own places to go, and most of them were excited and looking forward to life in the academy. On the Azure Cloud leaderboard, other than the blacksmith leaderboard which remained unchanged, there were some changes to the other 3 leaderboards. Some were on the leaderboard, some were off the leaderboard. Some were happy, some were regretful. However, this had nothing to do with Chu Luiyue. After the examination, Chu Luiyue and Elder Wanjing discussed that they would formally learn the next day, and then left Qingming Square and returned to their own residence. In the room, Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged and fell into deep thought. Taizu, what do you think is going on with the illusion god Pearl? Chu Luiyue murmured in confusion. If she didn't have talent, then Tianlei clearly came out. If I say I have it. That thing just came out and went back. Taizu was silent for a while, and then said faintly, maybe you're too fierce. Chu Luiyue. Am I? Taizu, ha. Was he the one who forcibly captured those Tianlei people back then? Chu Luiyue. Cough. Wasn't that a special situation? Who would have thought that these Tianlei people would be like this? If you restrain yourself a little more, maybe it'll be better. Taizu thought for a while. But the chances are not high. Some things can't be hidden anymore. You should give up. Chu Luiyue, originally, she really wanted to learn how to forge a divine artifact. After thinking for a long time, Chu Luiyue couldn't figure it out, so she simply gave up. If she didn't want to cultivate, then so be it. She would first complete Elder Wanzheng's goal and get on the celestial physician list. Chu Luiyue put away her thoughts and began to focus on cultivation. The surrounding heaven and earth force flowed into her body and gradually formed an energy vortex above her head. Ever since she broke through to rank 7 and recovered her Tianjing Yuan Meridian, Chu Luiyue's speed of devouring the force was much faster than before. Naturally, it was more convenient and faster for her to cultivate. Time passed bit by bit. The sky quickly darkened. The moon was in the middle of the sky. Unknowingly, a tall and slender figure quietly approached. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes. She threw a punch. Bang! A warm and broad palm had already grasped her hand with great precision. A familiar cold fragrance attacked her. In an instant, it filled her body. Rong Xiao had already approached her. You deliberately made me wait for so long, His low and mellow voice was as seductive as the spring breeze in the dark night, making one's heart itch slightly. Digression, it's done. Chapter 1139. A subtle numbness spread from the tip of her ear to half of her body. Chu Luiyue curled her fingers and simply relaxed her body. She looked back at him with a faint smile. This is really a misunderstanding. Senior brother Rong Xiao, why did you come to my place in the middle of the night instead of discussing important matters with the elders? Rong Xiao looked at her sparkling eyes. Even in the dark night, they were still as bright as the stars, and they had a moving glow to them. He tightened his hand and played with her delicate and soft palm, but there was a hint of laziness in his tone. Are you angry? Chu Luiyue stared at him and shook her head. I'm just curious why you don't want me to come to the academy. It's not that I don't want to, but... Rong Xiao paused and recalled the scene when he saw Elder Huafeng and the others. It seemed that they hadn't been so happy and relaxed for a long time. Today, on the East Emperor Bell Tower, Elder Wenxi even proudly announced that Chu Luiyue was recruited by him. If they knew her true identity, even if I didn't want you to come, aren't you here now? Rong Xiao held his forehead helplessly, and a doting and indulgent smile hung on his thin lips. Chu Luiyue suddenly had an idea. You already knew. Rong Xiao hugged her slender waist from behind and held her tightly. Then, he rested his chin on her shoulder and said in a low and teasing voice. It would be strange if I couldn't even guess what my princess wanted to do. But... I just didn't expect you to be so fast. According to Chu Liuyue's intelligence and alertness, she would have noticed that something was wrong sooner or later. However, he didn't expect her to make up her mind so early and come directly to Lingxiao College. Chu Liyue thought to herself, that's true. If she hadn't accidentally talked to Lin Qifei about this matter that day, she wouldn't have acted so decisively. Anyway, I'm already a student of Lingxiao College. It's impossible for you to make me leave. Chu Liyue raised his eyebrows. Without Rongxiu, there was no point in staying in the Yuntian Tower. She still felt that this place was more interesting. Rongxiu suddenly laughed. Chu Liyue could even clearly feel the vibration of his chest. The man's scorching body temperature penetrated through the thin layers of clothes and spread to her body, even spreading to the bottom of her heart. That won't happen, said Rongxiu with a smile. You can stay here as long as you want. I'll help you deal with the Yuntian Tower. This time, Chu Liyue was really surprised. With a little force, she broke free from Rongxiu's embrace and turned to look at him seriously. Really? When have I ever lied to you? Rongxiu asked with a smile. Chu Liyue sneered. You've lied to me many times. Rongxiu was speechless. I forgot that he was a vengeful person. He leaned back and leaned against the head of the bed. His long legs were stretched out as he quietly stared at Chu Liyue with his deep eyes that seemed to be able to swallow everything. The gentleness and affection in his eyes seemed to be able to drown her. He sighed softly. His voice was much softer, but it was also filled with unquestionable certainty. If lying to you can exchange for a lifetime of peace and happiness, then I'm willing to lie to you for a lifetime. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly skipped a beat. This was the first time Rongxiu said such words to her. It was so straightforward and honest. Strictly speaking, Rongxiu wasn't lying, but hiding. Every time she remembered something or discovered some truth, Rongxiu wouldn't refute it. Instead, he would choose to admit it. It was like, in front of her eyes, there was a huge curtain that covered everything. Rongxiu was standing behind the curtain. He didn't take the initiative to pull it away, but if she reached out, he wouldn't stop her. Chu Liyue never understood why Rongxiu did this. He knew a lot of things, but he refused to tell her everything. Chu Liyue had many guesses in her heart, but she didn't expect to receive Rongxiu's answer at such a time. She was silent for a moment, stared at Rongxiu, and asked word by word, Rongxiu, you don't want me to remember the past, right? Rongxiu smiled, but shook his head. His slender fingers rubbed her palm carefully, as if he was holding a rare treasure. It's just that there are some bad things. Even if there was still their past in it. But, as long as it was for her, nothing else mattered. Rongxiu once thought that it wasn't a bad thing to let her never remember that part of her memory. But, some things seem to have been decided long ago. Since you've returned to the academy, I won't force you to leave. Rongxiu suddenly exerted force and pulled her into his embrace. Everything about you is ultimately up to you. Then I'll just stand by your side and accompany you. Rongxiu's expression was very calm. In the dark night, the faint moonlight shone on his face, making him look like an immortal and a demon. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. Something seemed to be surging in her chest, making her whole body heat up slightly. She suddenly leaned forward and bit his lower lip. Rongxiu's breathing stagnated, and he immediately tightened his grip on her waist. The world spun, and Chu Liyue was pressed against the soft mattress. She reached out and grabbed his shoulder, but he caught her with one hand. He easily and firmly held her two slender wrists above her head. Then, he deliberately raised his head slightly, avoiding her lips, and moved closer to her neck. He bit her tender and white earlobe, as if to vent his anger. Chu Liyue twisted her body uneasily and let out a low cry in her throat, but it was like a cat's meow, scratching people's ears and hearts. Rong Xiu's body instantly tensed up. He leaned closer to her and kissed her earlobe as if to comfort her, but his breath instantly became much hotter. The two of them were intimately entangled with each other, but they also seemed to want to take the opportunity to talk about something. Just as the air became hot and ambiguous, there was a sudden knock on the door. Knock knock. Then, it was a familiar woman's voice. Chu Yu. Are you there? It was Luo Shishir. Chu Luyue came back to her senses. Her originally hazy and moist eyes quickly became clear again. Right, they had previously agreed to go to Wine Mountain to celebrate tonight. However, when Rong Xiu came, she forgot about this matter. Chu Luyue pushed the man in front of her. When Rong Xiu heard the commotion outside, he hesitated for a moment. But it was only for a moment. Then, as if he didn't notice at all, he hugged her even tighter and kissed her slowly. Chu Yu. Luo Shishir called out strangely again. Why didn't anyone respond? Is he not here? This was Luo Yanming's voice. Of course not. We already agreed on this during the day. Luo Shishir said doubtfully. Chu Luyue glared at Rong Xiu warningly. Rong Xiu chuckled silently. The light in the depths of his deep eyes flashed casually, but there was a subtle sense of danger. Appointment. Chapter 1140. This voice didn't come from Rong Xiu's mouth, but it still reached Chu Luyue's ears clearly. It was low and hoarse, easily moving one's heart. Chu Luyue was dazed for a moment, but she quickly reacted and narrowed her eyes dangerously. She didn't believe that Rong Xiu didn't know about this. It's just a trip to Thousand Wine Mountain. Thousand Wine Mountain. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. She didn't know what he was thinking, but there was an unfathomable smile in his eyes. It's indeed a good place. She had just returned to the academy, and she was going there. Chu Luyue blinked. Why, can't I go to Thousand Wine Mountain? Looking at the way Rong Xiu mentioned Thousand Wine Mountain, it didn't seem like a compliment. Of course not. Rong Xiu smiled and gently tapped her lips. Go early and come back early. Be obedient and don't cause any trouble. Chu Luyue was speechless. She was just going to have fun with a few friends, not to fight or cause trouble. Rong Xiu's tone sounded like she was going to do something bad on purpose. Why is there no movement at all? Could it be that he's really not here? This was Zhuo Xing's voice. Why don't we go somewhere else to look? It shouldn't be. Since we've already agreed. Luo Shishir muttered. Let's go in and take a look. If there's no one, then we'll talk. Luo Yanming said and was about to push the door open. Chu Luyue frowned slightly. The moment the door opened, Rong Xiu's figure disappeared from the room. Chu Yu. Seeing Chu Luyue sitting cross-legged on the bed, Luo Yanming was stunned. Why didn't you answer when I called you outside? Chu Luyue slowly heaved a sigh of relief and jumped down from the bed. It's nothing. I was thinking about a prescription and was a little absent-minded, so I didn't hear you. In the dark night, the light in the room was very dim. They couldn't clearly see Chu Luyue's slightly red and swollen lips, as well as his watery and hazy eyes. Chu Luyue smiled. Let's go. Thousand Wine Mountain. When they arrived, the moon was already high in the sky. The bright moonlight slanted down, casting a faint blue shadow on the forest. The night breeze blew gently, and the leaves rustled. Occasionally, one could hear various sounds. Chu Luyue listened attentively and realized that the noise seemed to be coming from the top of the mountain. Today is the beginning of the month. Many students will come here. Luo Shishir explained as if she had seen through Chu Luyue's thoughts. We're already quite late. However, fourth brother has already helped us book a spot here, so we can just go there directly. Only then did Chu Luiyue realize that the 10,000 wine mountain was so particular. Isn't this place open to everyone? Why is it so troublesome? Chu Luiyue asked casually. Of course it's because of the spring. Shusheng, who was walking in front, suddenly turned around and chuckled. It seems like you really don't know. It's said that the spring water that gushes out from the spring is very beneficial to the cultivator's body. Sometimes, it can even help one break through the shackles and reach a higher level. Therefore, the closer to the spring, the more precious the spot is. Today is the beginning of the month, so there are the most people here. Of course, it's the hardest to get a spot. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. He could roughly guess what was going on. Everyone had worked hard during the day. It was rare for them to have a place to relax, so they naturally wouldn't miss it. The new students who passed the assessment wanted to celebrate. The older students who made it onto the Azure Sky roll also wanted to celebrate. Even those who were defeated couldn't help but have some thoughts of drowning their sorrows in alcohol. It wasn't surprising that this place would be so lively. Is the spring water really so magical? In comparison, Chu Luiyue was more curious about this. She had seen a lot of heavenly treasures, but she had never heard of such an existence. The spring water that gushed out from the spring had such amazing effects. It made people curious. Hee. I've only heard about it. As for the specific effects, won't we naturally know when we get up there? Shusheng smiled indifferently. Obviously, he didn't care much about these rumors. What he cared about was whether they could have a good time tonight. Chu Luiyue didn't ask any more questions and continued to walk up. The closer they got to the top of the mountain, the clearer the lively sounds became. It seemed to be mixed with the sound of a stream. Chu Luiyue looked towards the source of the sound. Unfortunately, she couldn't see clearly in the dense forest. She could barely see what seemed to be a stream flowing down. The moonlight shone on it, making it sparkle. It didn't seem to be anything special. Shusheng, why are you only here now? A hearty young man's voice suddenly came from the top of the mountain. We all thought that you weren't planning to come. Immediately after, Chu Luiyue saw a few people walking down from above. Shusheng laughed loudly. Ha! If we didn't come, wouldn't it be too boring? After listening to their conversation, Chu Luiyue understood their identities. They were also students that the Xian masters had just recruited today. Only the person talking to Shusheng at the front was a senior brother who had come to the academy about a year earlier than them. Coincidentally, he and Shusheng had known each other for a long time. Therefore, their relationship seemed to be very close. After that, Shusheng introduced them to each other. After hearing the name Chu Yu, those people's gazes paused on Chu Luiyue for a moment. However, most of their attention was still on Luo Shishi. Especially the young man who greeted Shusheng, he was very eager to Luo Shishi. Anyone could tell that he had feelings for Luo Shishi. From their words, it wasn't hard to tell that they knew each other. However, Luo Shishi didn't seem to be interested in him. She had always been reserved and polite and didn't even say much. Just like that, the group of people went up the mountain together in a subtle atmosphere. Thousand Wine Mountain was actually a very tall and majestic mountain peak. The top of the mountain was vast and could accommodate many people at the same time. Moreover, under the bright moonlight, the scenery was just right. Coupled with the rich and refreshing wine fragrance in the air, it was even more intoxicating. From afar, Chu Luiyue could smell that strange fragrance. She sniffed lightly and took a deep breath. She immediately felt as if her entire chest and abdomen were soaked in that intoxicating wine fragrance. However, this smell wouldn't really make people lose their minds. Therefore, the elders of the academy would turn a blind eye to the students relaxing on Thousand Wine Mountain on this day. After Chu Luiyue reached the top of the mountain, she immediately saw the spring in the middle. Chapter 1141. Speaking of which, it was strange. This spring was growing at the top of Thousand Wine Mountain. No one knew how the spring water gushed out. The size of the mouth of the spring was about the size of a normal well. The edge of the mouth of the spring was made of translucent white mountain rocks. It was unknown whether it was because of the spring water or because the moonlight was too bright, but in any case, the mouth of the spring looked exceptionally clear and moist. From afar, there was still spring water gushing out of the spring. Then, it flowed down, forming a stream that spread down from the mountain peak. There were many people standing around. Some of them directly filled their wine jugs or wine cups, drank it all in one gulp, or slowly tasted it. Everyone chatted with each other, and the atmosphere was very lively. Chu Luiyue and the others arrived at the location they had agreed on earlier. It was actually a boundary beside the stream. There was still a small distance between this place and the spring. Chu Luiyue scanned her surroundings and recognized the people standing closest to the spring. They seemed to be her senior brothers and senior sisters who were very strong. When the people beside them looked over, they were obviously envious. However, no one crossed the line. Obviously, everyone here was very obedient. I really don't know when we'll be able to stand closest to the spring. It was rare for Zhuoxing to lower his voice, his eyes filled with envy. I heard that the spring water that has just gushed out of the spring contains the purest energy. When it flows down, its effect will be greatly weakened. If we can stand there. Hey! Who doesn't want to in the academy? But how can this be so easy? You have to know that the people standing there are all in the top 50 of the Azure Cloud roll. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. Top 50, that was basically 40 or so. Otherwise, they would directly say top 40, or even top 30, and so on. In the academy, this ranking could definitely be considered as one of the most outstanding. Of course, it could not be said to be the top. On the contrary, the most powerful ones would not appear in such a place. Chu Luiyue retracted his gaze and took a few steps closer to the stream to take a closer look. Standing here, he could indeed feel a subtle aura contained within. It was as if it was some kind of very special pure energy. Chu Luiyue was curious. It was said that this Thousand Wine Mountain was just an ordinary mountain back then. On a certain day 1,000 years ago, for some unknown reason, there was a strange phenomenon in the world. Wind and thunder rumbled. After the chaos, such a wonderful thing had appeared on the 10,000 Wine Mountain. It had been a very long time since then. TSK, the wine of this myriad wine mountain is indeed good stuff. Zhuoxing could no longer hold back his curiosity and casually poured himself a cup. After drinking it, his eyes immediately lit up. You guys give it a try too. Luo Yanming and Gushi Yi also tried drinking a few mouthfuls. They were pleasantly surprised. It is indeed a good item. This seems to be even more fragrant than the 9-leaf green that we drank in the clan before. At this moment, Chu Luiyue felt a weight on his shoulder. She turned her head and saw that Dumpling had unknowingly appeared and was squatting on her shoulder. At this moment, its eyes were shining as it looked at the flowing spring water with a longing look. Chu Luiyue, you want it? Dumpling nodded frantically. Yes. I want to. This smell is simply too fragrant, all right. Chu Luiyue rarely saw it like this, so she could not help but laugh. She took out a cup, filled it to the brim, and handed it to it. Here, for you. Dumpling poked its head in and drank a mouthful. Its eyes shone even more brightly. In a short while, Dumpling had finished all the spring water in the cup. It smacked its lips and looked at Chu Luiyue eagerly. Its eyes were full of emotions. You want more? Chu Luiyue glanced at its stomach suspiciously. Dumpling had not revealed its true body now. It was only the size of a palm. The cup just now could have contained it. She didn't know how it managed to drink so much spring water. Now, it wanted more. Dumpling inched closer to her and pecked her on the cheek. Then, it used its furry little head to rub against her face. Its lackey nature was completely exposed. Chu Luiyue, Chu Yu, is this your contracted magical beast? Luo Shishir asked in surprise. Chu Luiyue nodded. Hiss, this seems to be a red-tailed phoenix. Luo Yanming, who was standing at the side, could not hide her surprise. This was a divine beast. Moreover, it was a divine beast with an extremely strong bloodline power. Even they might not be able to contract such a divine beast. Luo Shishir also widened her eyes slightly. She knew that Chuyu had a divine beast contract. Otherwise, he would not have taken the initiative to ask for the refiner's test during the day. However, she did not expect Chuyu's divine beast to be such a powerful existence. I really couldn't tell. Chuyu, how old are you? You actually have such a divine beast contract. Shuixing glanced at it and was also shocked. Aren't you a celestial physician? How can you contract such a powerful divine beast? They all knew that Chuyu's realm as a warrior was only at the early stage of the 7th stage. According to his talent and strength, there should be no reason for him to be able to subdue such an arrogant divine beast. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. I'm just lucky. But isn't this too good? Shuixing could not help but murmur as he looked at Chu Luiyue with a strange gaze. Where did you come from? According to such a family background, he should be a disciple of a first-class family, right? Chu Luiyue smiled but did not say anything. He had no intention of revealing his identity. Luo Shishir and the others did not care. In Lingxiao College, students could come from any place or force on the continent. For various reasons, many people were not willing to completely expose their origins. In addition, in the college, there was the guidance and supervision of the dean and elders. Everyone's focus would be on cultivation and not other aspects. Therefore, when a person did not want to reveal his background and origin, others would tactfully not ask anymore. In any case, in the college, these were all secondary. As long as you were outstanding enough, you did not need to care about anything else. Chu Luiyue teased Dumpling. If you want more, you can drink it yourself. In any case, they were standing by the stream. Dumpling only needed to fly down. However, Dumpling shook its head and looked in a certain direction with bright eyes full of eagerness. Chu Luiyue followed its gaze and the corner of her mouth twitched slightly. You. Don't tell me you want to go to the spring to drink it. Dumpling flapped its wings. Yes. It's there. Chu Luiyue. She grabbed Dumpling's wings and lifted it up, looking straight into its eyes. Tuanzi, do you have any misunderstandings about yourself or about your master? She did not even have the qualifications to go there, but it was interested. Dumpling looked at her eagerly. Let it go. The legendary three-eyed eagle's cold and indifferent voice suddenly sounded. Chapter 1142. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Although it broke through the shackles and became a red-tailed phoenix, there's still a large part of its bloodline power that hasn't been activated. This is a good opportunity. The legendary three-eyed eagle said. Otherwise, who knows how long it'll take to activate its bloodline power just by relying on your breakthrough. My breakthrough. Chu Luiyue was confused. That's right. It wasn't born a red-tailed phoenix. Without the guidance of its race, the bloodline power in its body can't be fully unleashed. Only when you become a god-level powerhouse can its potential be fully unleashed. Note that it's a supreme god, not a demigod. The legendary three-eyed eagle's voice was cold and straightforward, almost unreasonable. If you want to reach this step now, it'll take a long time. Chu Luiyue, it was full of truth, and she couldn't even refute it. In that case, the spring water coming out of the spring on the top of the mountain has such an effect on Dumpling? Yes. The legendary three-eyed eagle gave a simple sound of acknowledgement. Of course, if you don't want to, just stop it and wait in the future. Chu Luiyue, at this point, wasn't it a little redundant to add this sentence? The legendary three-eyed eagle was arrogant and cold. For it to open its mouth like this, it was definitely not a small matter. She really didn't know that Dumpling had such a problem before. She looked at Dumpling calmly. Those bright and beautiful eyes were looking at her with incomparable desire. Chu Luiyue paused. All right, I'll take you there. Dumpling's eyes were bright, and it was about to kiss her intimately. Chu Luiyue pressed down on its little wings and looked at Zhuoxing beside her. Is there any way to go to the spring? Zhuoxing reacted for a moment and then understood Chu Luiyue's meaning. He looked at her with a strange expression. You really want to go there? Don't do it. Didn't I just say that it's their territory? We can't go there. I just want to ask for some spring water. Besides, the Myriad Wine Mountain is the Academy's territory. When did it become theirs? Chu Luiyue interrupted him with a faint smile. If someone stronger came, I'm afraid they would have to obediently give up their positions, right? Shoo, you can't say such things. The young man who was in charge of welcoming them suddenly spoke. He first glanced at the mouth of the spring to make sure that those people hadn't heard Chu Luiyue's words. Then, he slowly let out a sigh of relief. He looked at Chu Luiyue with a frown that was both complaining and warning. You're new here and don't know the rules. It's fine if it's your first time, but don't ever say it again in the future. Otherwise, if you cause any trouble, even I won't be able to protect you. Chu Luiyue's gaze lightly swept across him. Yes, the middle stage of the ninth stage indeed did not have much ability. Not to mention protecting them, he might not even be able to protect himself. There should be other ways, right? Luo Shishir suddenly spoke and looked at the young man with an inquiring expression. Senior brother Yin Fan. A troubled expression appeared on Yin Fan's face. It was rare for Luo Shishir to take the initiative to talk to him, but it was for that Chu Yu. He felt very uncomfortable in his heart, and when he looked at Chu Luiyue, he became more and more unpleasant to the eye. Of course, there's nothing absolute. If you really want to go, there are actually two ways. First, use points to exchange with them. Usually, it's at least 50,000 points. Second, ask a middleman to introduce you. As long as this person's identity is high enough, the other party will naturally give face. He glanced at Chu Luiyue, and a hint of ridicule appeared at the corner of his eyes. Junior brother Chu Yu, you can choose one of them. As soon as he finished speaking, the few of them fell silent for a moment. These two methods didn't seem to have any problems at first, but in reality, the difficulty of executing them was very high. On one hand, they had just arrived at the academy and couldn't take out so many points. On the other hand, even if they did, very few people would be willing to exchange them for this. As for the second method, they had just arrived, so how could they know anyone? If fourth brother is willing to step in. Luo Yanming muttered softly. Luo Yanlin was also on the Azure Cloud roll, and his ranking was quite high, so these people should give face. But tonight, Luo Yanlin didn't come with them at all. This greatly increased the difficulty of making peace. Why don't I go and talk to them? For fourth brother's sake, Luo Shishir had just opened her mouth when she was rejected by Yin Fan. It's useless for you to go. They only recognize opponents with similar strength. Even if your senior brother Luo Yanlin's sister, they won't give any face. If one or two of them brought their families, wouldn't it be a mess? There was only hope for this matter if Luo Yanlin came personally. Then isn't this matter still hopeless? Shuixing used her elbow to poke Chu Luiyue. Hey, Chu Yu, why are you so persistent about going there? Our current position is already pretty good. Why do you have to find so much trouble for yourself? Luo Shishir glanced at her and pursed her lips. Why don't we ask fourth brother for help next time? Since they were all family, fourth brother shouldn't refuse. Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. Dumpling lay pitifully on her shoulder, the light in its eyes gradually dimming. How long will it take for Dumpling's bloodline to fully awaken? Chu Luiyue asked in her heart. After a pause, the legendary three-eyed eagle said, at least stay at the spring for a month. Chu Luiyue rubbed her temples with a headache. If it was a day or two, she could still get Luo Yanlin to help. At most, she would owe him a few favors. But this month, it was very difficult. Dumpling leaned on her shoulder listlessly. Actually, if it didn't work, it wouldn't go. Anyway, the bloodline power was here, so it could be slowly activated. Chu Luiyue tapped its head. If she used points to exchange, she would probably use them much faster than she earned them. Moreover, points were very precious in the academy. If she used them all for this, it wouldn't be worth it. If she could get on the Azure Cloud ranking and rely on her own strength to occupy a place, Chu Luiyue thought about it seriously and felt that she wouldn't be able to get into the top 50 in a short period of time, so she might as well give up. From the looks of it, there seemed to be no other way. She couldn't let Rong Xiu personally do it. Chu Luiyue pondered in her heart. Sigh, Chu Yu, if you ask me, don't even think about it. The spring water of Thousand Wine Mountain is very beneficial for cultivation, but in the end, if you want to become stronger, you still have to work hard. Shuixing advised casually. Chu Luiyue looked up and chuckled. You're right. Luo Shishir also comforted her, that's right. According to your talent, it's only a matter of time before you get on the Azure Cloud ranking. When you're strong enough, wouldn't it be a piece of cake to come here? Her voice was very gentle. Yin Fan watched from the side. Suddenly, he frowned and said, what's wrong? Actually, there's another way. Chapter 1143. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and glanced at him. Yin Fan held the wine cup in his hand. His face was slightly red, and his lips and teeth were filled with the smell of alcohol. If they didn't know that the spring water wouldn't intoxicate people, they would have thought that he was drunk. His hand moved and pointed in another direction. His eyes seemed to flash with a mysterious and strange light. Everyone comes to Thousand Wine Mountain from evening to early morning. Other than that, there's no one here. If you really want to. Yin Fan, what are you talking about? Luo Shishir interrupted him with some dissatisfaction and frowned slightly. You know that during the day, no one is allowed to enter Thousand Wine Mountain without permission. Aren't you deliberately letting Chu Yu make a mistake? I only opened my mouth because I saw that he really wanted to go to the spring. Yin Fan burped. The strong smell of alcohol was almost suffocating. He stared at Chu Luiyue as if he was smiling, but there was no smile in his eyes. Junior brother Chu Yu, what do you think? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Was Yin Fan venting his anger on her because of Luo Shishir? This was really an unexpected disaster. Originally, Chu Luiyue wanted to give him some face, but this person was narrow-minded and there was really no need to continue interacting with him. She took half a step back, stroked Tuanzi to comfort her, and said lightly, thank you for your good intentions, senior brother Yin Fan. However, I have my own plans, so I won't trouble you. Yin Fan sneered. Pretentious. He didn't believe that this Chu Yu really had such guts. He chuckled. Junior brother Chuyu, you just came to the academy, so there are many things that you don't understand. As your senior brother, it's inevitable that I have to remind you. It's good to have ideas, but if you want things that don't belong to you, you'll only cause trouble for yourself. The warning in his words was very strong. Luo Yanming and the others sensed that something was wrong, and their expressions changed slightly. Luo Shishir frowned even more. However, Chu Luiyue only smiled indifferently. Thank you for your advice, senior brother. However, my luck has always been very good. Yin Fan looked at her with a heavy gaze. Chu Luiyue had already turned his gaze to the spring at the top of the mountain. Actually, Yin Fan's words had indeed reminded her. The opening time of Myriad Wine Mountain was very strange, but perhaps because it had always been like this, everyone was used to it. During the day, what kind of secret was hidden in the 10,000 Wine Mountain? Whoosh! At this moment, the sound of wings flapping could be heard. When Chu Luiyue heard this, he looked up. The next moment, a red figure suddenly flew down from the top of the mountain. Ha! Ah Tong, what's wrong with that little thing of yours? At the same time, a hearty laughter came from the top of the mountain. The other woman replied sweetly. Bah! You're the crazy one. This is a divine beast with the bloodline of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Perhaps after drinking this spring water, his strength has increased again. As he spoke, the red figure had already flown down from above. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. Only then did he see the red flames burning around the magical beast. Wherever it passed, the branches and leaves would burn and the mountain rocks would be charred black. This was enough to show its power. When it passed through the noisy crowd, it attracted waves of exclamations. In order to avoid this magical beast, the crowd retreated one after another. The originally lively mountain peak was instantly in chaos. Chu Luiyue didn't want to get involved in this trouble, so he took a few steps back, wanting to avoid it. Unexpectedly, the magical beast suddenly turned around halfway and headed straight for Chu Luiyue. When the blazing temperature swept over, Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. This thing, swoosh! Dumpling suddenly became energetic. It flapped its wings and was about to rush out. Chu Luiyue stopped it and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that the magical beast that was rushing over was very familiar. She tilted her head and glanced at Dumpling. The same figure, the same flames, it seemed to be a red-tailed phoenix. Chee! The red-tailed phoenix opposite her stared intently at Dumpling, and the flames on its body burned even more fiercely. Immediately, its speed suddenly increased and it headed straight for Dumpling. This was an attack. Chu Luiyue immediately understood something, and her expression turned cold. Tuanzi's eyes were suddenly burning with a crazy desire to fight. However, Chu Luiyue still suppressed it and retreated at the same time. Tashaw! A ball of fire flew out. It brushed past Chu Luiyue's ear. A few scattered strands of hair were burned, and a faint smell spread out, causing Chu Luiyue to feel a sense of frustration. Chu Yu! Are you okay? Luo Shishir and the others hurriedly asked. That move just now was really too thrilling. If there was a slight deviation, then, I'm fine. Chu Luiyue's expression was indifferent as she looked ahead coldly. Opposite her, the red-tailed phoenix was staring at Dumpling on her shoulder with a provocative gaze. They were both red-tailed phoenixes. Logically speaking, since the two of them were of the same race, they should be closer. However, in reality, the red-tailed phoenix race was inherently competitive. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were aggressive. Once they met, there had to be a victor. Therefore, this red-tailed phoenix suddenly rushed over. Its goal was to compete with Dumpling. This was the rule of their race. Originally, others could not say anything. However, such a rash sneak attack was meaningless. Ha! I was wondering what was wrong with this little thing. So there's another red-tailed phoenix here. Chu Luiyue looked over in the direction of the voice. A well-built young man was standing at the top of the mountain, looking down at this scene. Beside him stood a young woman with a curvaceous figure. She was gorgeous and her red hair was very flamboyant. At this moment, she also saw Chu Luiyue standing below, as well as Dumpling on her shoulder. Her originally smiling face turned slightly cold as she raised her eyebrows. Really? The academy is indeed full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. They even bump into divine beasts. How interesting. Everyone could hear the displeasure in her words. Ah, Tong, I think the color of her red-tailed phoenix seems to be richer and purer than yours. The young man laughed as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. If we really fight, I think you're going to lose. The red-haired woman frowned and sized up Chu Luiyue. Newcomer. Another man beside her suddenly said. Isn't that the disciple that Elder Wanjing just accepted today? I think his name is Chu Yu. Chu Luiyue could clearly see that after hearing this, the red-haired woman's expression became even worse. So it's such a powerful junior brother. To be able to catch Elder Wanjing's eye, he must be very outstanding in all aspects, right? The young man who spoke at the beginning laughed maliciously. Ah, Tong, didn't you want to go to Elder Wanjing's side back then, but you were eliminated in the end? The red-haired woman glared at him, then looked at Chu Luiyue and said like an order. You, come here. Digression, la 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 la. Chapter 1144. With a delicate rebuke, the surrounding people quieted down and looked at Chu Luiyue with different expressions. Chu Luiyue paused for a moment and walked forward. Chu Yu. Luo Shishir came up to stop her with a worried expression. Why don't we go with you, Shishir? Do you know who that woman is? Yin Fan sneered with a warning look in his eyes. That's Lu Yintong, who's ranked 49th on the Celestial Physician list. At the same time, she's also ranked 46th on the Warrior list. She's not someone to be trifled with. And the man who spoke first, Gong Xing, was ranked 39th on the Warrior list. The others were not weak either. They were not ordinary people. We can't afford to provoke them. This ranking, in the Spirit Firmament Academy, was absolutely outstanding. One had to know that the entire college recruited geniuses from all over the world. It was already impressive enough to be able to enter Lingxiao College, not to mention that these people had already made a name for themselves in the college. But, senior brother Luo Yanlin's ranking is higher than theirs, but you have to know that in the college, there are some things that can only be solved by yourself. As Yin Fan spoke, he looked at Chu Luiyue meaningfully. Luo Shishir wanted to say something more, but Chu Luiyue gave her a reassuring look and chuckled. Don't worry, I know what to do. With that, she took a step forward and went up. Many people looked over. For a moment, the top of the mountain was exceptionally quiet. Little Phoenix, come back. Lu Yintong shouted at the red-tailed phoenix. With a piercing sound, the red figure quickly drew an arc in the air. The red-tailed phoenix had already returned to Lu Yintong's side, and the flames on its body had quietly dissipated. Chu Luiyue walked over and stopped 5 steps away from the few of them. The two sides faced each other and fell into a subtle atmosphere. Lu Yintong's gaze first swept over Dumpling. At this moment, both sides were facing each other and were very close to each other. Naturally, they could see each other's situation more clearly. Everyone, including Lu Yintong, saw Dumpling nestled on Chu Luiyue's shoulder. The blazing red color on its body was indeed pure and rich. It was clearly much better than Lu Yintong's. This also proved that the bloodline power in its body was purer and denser. Lu Yintong frowned. Ever since she contracted this red-tailed phoenix, she had always been very proud of it. After all, not everyone had such good luck. Who knew that this kind of new student who had just arrived at the academy, who looked ordinary, actually also had a red-tailed red phoenix? And it was even better than hers. It would be a miracle if Lu Yintong felt good about it. Chu Yu greets senior brothers and sisters. Chu Luiyue was the first to speak and politely greeted them. However, his attitude was neither servile nor overbearing, and he didn't seem to be nervous. So you're Chu Yu. Lu Yintong looked at Chu Luiyue with an unbridled and picky gaze, as if she was looking at a cheap object. Chu Luiyue pretended not to see her gaze, and his expression was still calm and composed. I'm new here. Senior brothers and sisters, please give me your guidance. Ha! You're a talkative kid. Gong Xing, who was at the side, clapped his hands and smiled happily. Your red-tailed phoenix is quite interesting. Ah, Tong is always showing off her phoenix. Today, another one has finally arrived. Why don't we let them compete? Chu Liuyue's expression changed slightly. Senior brothers and sisters are all giants among men. I don't dare to be presumptuous. You don't want to compete. Gong Xing's words were very straightforward, and many times, they even sounded a little harsh. TSK, Tong, even junior brother doesn't want to compete with you. Chu Luiyue glanced at Gong Xing. His words were obviously intentional. As expected, Lu Yintong's expression turned even colder. Her eyes were fixed on Chu Luiyue. Why? Do you think your divine beast will win, so you can't be bothered to compete with me? Chu Luiyue. Was there something wrong with their brains? However, she didn't say this in public. She even concealed her expression very well. Senior brothers and sisters, you've misunderstood. You're all powerful figures on the Azure Cloud roll. I've just arrived at the academy, and I'm still far from senior sister in all aspects. I don't dare to compare myself to senior sister. If you don't agree now, you'll be ignorant. Lu Yintong interrupted Chu Luiyue impatiently. You must know the rules of the red-tailed phoenix clan. Since that's the case, why don't we just let them fight and determine the winner? She was already giving the other party enough face by taking the initiative to invite him. If he dared to refuse in public, Chu Luiyue sensed the faint cold air. She blinked her eyes. Since senior brothers and sisters insist, then it's better to comply. But what? Don't dilly-dally. Lu Yintong seemed to be very impatient. Hey, wait. Gong Xing suddenly interrupted and looked at the two of them with a smile. Ah, Tong, if it's just a simple competition, how boring would that be? Do you think we should bet on something? What are you up to now? Lu Yintong looked at him with disdain. Gong Xing didn't seem to care about her gaze at all. He continued to smile. Look, your red-tailed phoenix's bloodline power is obviously weaker than junior brother Chu Yu's. However, you're stronger than him. The power your divine beast can unleash is naturally stronger than his. So, in short, the two of you have your own strengths. It's really hard to say who will win this round. In my opinion, why don't we bet with 3 drops of divine beast blood? Whoever loses will take out 3 drops of divine beast blood and give it to the other party. The surrounding people instantly fell silent. Regardless of whether they had divine beasts or not, they knew what these 3 drops of divine beast blood meant. There was a limit to the amount of divine beast bloodline power in each divine beast's body. Giving away 3 droplets was no different from giving away the power of his bloodline to the other party for free. If it were any other competition, it would be meaningless to compete like this. However, these two are red-tailed phoenixes. Gong Xing's eyes flickered with excitement. They were of the same race, which meant that they could devour each other's bloodline power. Lu Yintong had an idea. At first, she didn't think of it, but after hearing Gong Xing's words, she was a little tempted. If she could snatch the other party's bloodline power and integrate it into her contracted divine beast's body, then her divine beast would definitely be able to surpass it. Okay. It's decided. She looked at Chu Luyue. Chu Yu, do you agree? Although it was a question, it wasn't an inquiry tone. Obviously, they wouldn't allow Chu Luyue to refuse. Chu Luyue narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the spring that was gurgling beside him. He suddenly smiled. Okay. However, I have a request. I want to increase the bet. Chapter 11:45. When everyone heard this, they were all stunned. Raise the bet. Lu Yintong looked at her suspiciously. How do you want to raise the bet? Chu Luyue raised her hand and pointed at the spring. If I win, other than the 3 drops of divine beast blood, I also want to stay in the spring for a month. I believe this isn't difficult for senior sister Lu, right? Lu Yintong didn't expect Chu Luyue's request to be this. She frowned. After realizing what she said, she felt conflicted. Because this was actually quite troublesome for her. One had to know that even if her ranking on the Azure Cloud roll was not bad, there were many other people who were also good. Occasionally, they would want to come to Thousand Wine Mountain to fight for a spot. After all, the spring was only so big, and there were only a few spots next to it. It wouldn't be a problem for one to occupy the best spot for a day or 2. Everyone could take turns. But if one wanted to occupy it for a month, that would be too much. Even she couldn't guarantee that she would be able to do this for an entire month. But now, Chu was actually using this as a bet. Chu Luyue's lips curled up into a light smile as she looked at her. She was neither arrogant nor rash, and she was calm and collected. It was as if he didn't think that the bet he just proposed was that shocking. Ha ha ha. Junior brother Chu Yu is really straightforward. Gong Xing was full of energy when he heard this and hurriedly urged Lu Yintong to agree. Ah Tong, junior brother has already taken the initiative. Don't you dare to agree. These words provoked Lu Yintong. She glared at him. You're the one who doesn't dare. Do you think I'll lose? No one thought that she would lose. Although everyone could see that her contracted divine beast's bloodline was slightly inferior to the other parties, she was still a powerhouse on the Azure Cloud roll, and the combat strength of her divine beast couldn't be underestimated. And the other party was just a junior brother who had just entered the academy. Moreover, he specialized in celestial physician, and his cultivation as a mystic master seemed to be only at the early stage of rank 7. There was even less to worry about. I agree to your bet. Lu Yintong looked straight at Chu Luyue, her eyes still high and mighty. However, if you lose, what punishment will there be? Chu Luyue shrugged and chuckled. Senior sister Lu, you can do whatever you want with me. It's a deal. Lu Yintong gave the red-tailed phoenix a look. Whoosh! It spread its wings, and the blazing flames rose again. The surrounding air seemed to be burning up. The people who were standing closer to them unconsciously took a few steps back. Who didn't know that this thing's battle prowess was astonishing, and it had the same fiery temper as its master. The slightest bit of carelessness could cause one to be implicated. At the top of the mountain, with Chu Luyue and Lu Yintong as the center, an empty space quickly appeared. The people below had already surrounded them. Although they didn't dare to get too close, their eyes were fixed on the 2 people who were confronting each other. Chu Luyue nodded on Dumpling's head and lowered his voice. I've already fought for an opportunity for you. Whether you can seize it or not is up to you. Dumpling nodded her head vigorously and flew out quickly. Whoosh! The flames around its body also began to burn fiercely. The difference between it and the other one was that the flames on its body were obviously more intense and crimson. And the pressure contained within it was obviously even stronger than before. The comparison between the two sides was obvious. Lu Yintang was even more unhappy, but when she thought about how she would be able to obtain the bloodline power of the other party's divine beast after this competition, her gloomy expression changed. She glanced at Chu Luyue, who was not far away, and saw that her face was still calm. She frowned and looked away. Children who had just entered the academy always thought that they were the most outstanding geniuses in the world. If they didn't learn their lesson, they wouldn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Why would Chiyu agree to such a bet? Luo Shishir couldn't help but murmur worriedly. He won't have any chance of winning this round. There's nothing he can do even if he doesn't agree. Based on the situation just now, no matter what he says, there's no other way for him to go. Luo Yanming patted her shoulder comfortingly. Let's watch first. If he really needs help, we'll ask fourth brother for help. Luo Shishir could only nod her head. Although they hadn't been in the academy for long, there were some rules that they knew long ago. For example, outsiders couldn't easily interfere in such a battle. In the academy, the strong were respected. If a person only knew how to rely on others and repeatedly let others support him, then he would only be looked down upon by others. Therefore, Chiyu had to deal with this battle by himself. Don't worry, the bloodline power of his divine beast doesn't seem to be weak. Maybe there's still a chance of winning. Shuo Xing scratched his head. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Luo Shishir smiled bitterly. He might as well not have said that. They were both red-tailed phoenixes. Even if their bloodline power was different, how big of a difference could there be? However, there was a huge chasm between Chu Yu and Lu Yintang. His defeat in this round was almost certain. Yet, he added such a bet in the end. I really don't know what he's thinking. You overestimate yourself. Since you dare to do this, you have to be prepared to pay the price. Yin Fan sneered. Soon, he will know that this is Lingxiao College, not a place where anyone can behave atrociously. The night was dark, and the moonlight was bright. On the top of the mountain, two red-tailed phoenixes faced each other from afar. Dumpling stared at the one in front of her and narrowed her eyes dangerously. Relying on its master's power, it tried to challenge it. It was really tired of living. Its wings flapped, and in the next moment, it disappeared on the spot. The crowd cried out in alarm. It was Chu Yu's demonic beast that attacked first. This demonic beast really took after its master's personality. It was very bold. Bang! The sound of a violent collision was heard. The two balls of flames collided fiercely. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere. The two figures were instantly entangled. Because they were of the same race, they were extremely similar. In addition, both of them had flames burning on their bodies. As they fought, they completely turned into a ball of fire, and everyone couldn't see clearly. From afar, they could only see a ball of flames that kept bursting with sparks. There was occasionally a blazing and terrifying fluctuation on it that spread out to the surroundings. Bang! Bang! Chee! All sorts of sounds of collision and falling could be heard. After a while, the two finally separated. A few feathers fell from Dumpling's body, and her entire body looked much more messy. As for the other one of its claws was bleeding, and its body was also stained with a few drops of blood. It looked even more miserable. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. Lu Yintang was originally confident of victory, but when she saw this scene, her expression changed slightly. Little Phoenix. She let out a clear shout. Defeat it. She had to win this battle. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone saw the flames on the red-tailed phoenix suddenly rise. Boom! A huge figure appeared in mid-air, casting a thick shadow. Blazing. Pressure. That red-tailed phoenix had transformed into its true body. It glanced coldly at Dumpling and immediately leaned over. Its sharp beak seemed to want to kill. Chapter 1146. Almost at the same time, Dumpling's figure also underwent a huge change. An even hotter flame suddenly started burning. However, in comparison, Dumpling seemed to be smaller than the other party. Lu Yintong could not help but sneer when she saw this scene. A confident expression appeared on her face. The power that a contracted divine beast could unleash was closely related to its master's realm and strength. No matter how pure this red-tailed phoenix's bloodline was, it could not change the fact that its master was only a rank 7 warrior. The gap between them could not be made up for. It's time to end this. With Lu Yintong's order, the red-tailed phoenix charged towards Dumpling. Its size had an obvious advantage. An astonishing pressure came crashing down on him. Dumpling flapped its wings and was about to fly up when it realized that the surrounding space had suddenly become very strange. Everything around it suddenly became heavy. It was as if it had fallen into a swamp, and even struggling became extremely difficult. Divine Realm. A cry of surprise came from the crowd. It was different from the human race who needed to cultivate bitterly and reach the high god realm before they could completely establish their own divine realm. Divine beasts had this talent from the moment they were born. As long as they reached adulthood, they would be able to unleash their own divine realm. At this moment, the red-tailed phoenix had clearly used this killing move. I heard that if the master of a contracted divine beast is not strong enough, it will implicate the divine beast and prevent it from unleashing all of its bloodline power. It seems that it's true. Chu Yu's red-tailed phoenix doesn't seem to have reached adulthood yet. This match is bound to be lost. Lu Yintong is already a demigod. Although the power that her contracted divine beast can unleash is limited, it should be more than enough to deal with Chu Yu, right? The crowd was in an uproar. They had already determined the outcome of this match. At this moment, the red-tailed phoenix's extremely sharp claws reached for Dumpling's eyes. It was as if it was going to dig out her eyeballs in the next moment. Dumpling's eyes burned with anger. Damn it, if I don't let you know how powerful I am, do you really think you can fly to the sky? Boom! In the next instant, under everyone's shocked gazes, a terrifying fluctuation suddenly erupted from Dumpling's body. Crack! In the void, there seemed to be something shattering. A trace of surprise flashed through the red-tailed phoenix's eyes. But very quickly, that surprise turned into fear and panic. Almost without thinking, it retreated in a flash. Little foe. Lu Yintong was astounded seeing this. Wasn't everything fine just now? How did it become like this in the blink of an eye? She could even clearly feel the fear in its heart. Soon, Lu Yintong found out why it had such a reaction. Bang bang bang. A series of crisp sounds rang out. The divine domain that the red-tailed red phoenix had displayed earlier was actually collapsing inch by inch along with the void. Numerous black spatial cracks stretched across the sky. Looking from afar, it was like the cracked earth, causing one's heart to palpitate. An even stronger pressure seemed to have cut through all obstacles, pressing forward with an indomitable will. Lu Yintong suddenly widened her eyes. Gong Xing's expression also changed. He unconsciously put down his arms that were originally crossed and looked at everything that was happening in front of him in shock and speechlessness. He almost thought that he had seen wrongly. The others' reactions were not any better. And all of this was only because Dumpling had also displayed her own divine domain. Although the range was very small, everywhere it passed, it easily crushed Lu Yintong's red-tailed phoenix. How is this possible? Gongxing sucked in a breath of cold air and muttered softly. Chu Yu is just a mere rank 7 warrior. How can his contracted divine beast display a divine domain? No one answered his question. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Seeing that the red-tailed phoenix was about to escape, Dumpling's eyes flashed with an extremely bright cold light. It quickly chased forward. At this moment, the nearby space had already been enveloped by Dumpling's divine domain. Therefore, its speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had already rushed behind the red-tailed phoenix. The red-tailed phoenix seemed to have sensed something and turned around. A rare trace of shock and fear appeared in its arrogant eyes. Dumpling glanced at it. Screech! A clear cry suddenly spread out and lingered in the sky above Thousand Wine Mountain for a long time. Everyone's hearts trembled. It was as if a heavy rock had fallen from above and smashed down heavily. In an instant, it made it difficult for people to move. It was as if even the blood in their bodies had solidified. This is the pressure of the red-tailed phoenix. Amidst the deathly silence, someone muttered in a low voice. His voice was soft, but it was filled with shock. This is a divine beast that truly possesses the bloodline of the crimson gold celestial phoenix. In the next moment, under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, Dumpling charged forward. The red-tailed phoenix dodged subconsciously. Swish! There was a huge wound on its wing. Feathers fluttered down, and it was covered in blood. White bones could even be seen at the wound. Many people sucked in a cold breath. She had only used one claw, but she had torn half of its wings. What kind of shocking combat strength was this? Even Lu Yintong was speechless as she looked at the scene in the sky. It was also a red-tailed red phoenix. In fact, her one was already an adult. It was bigger and seemed to be stronger. She thought that victory would be easy, but who knew, little phoenix? Lu Yintong suddenly came back to her senses and said sharply, "What are you doing? Defeat it. If it lost. When the red-tailed phoenix heard the order, a trace of struggle flashed in its eyes. However, before it was fully prepared, Dumpling's claw had already slapped down. Who asked you to be arrogant? Who asked you to be arrogant? What a shameful thing with such a weak bloodline. How dare you dream of defeating me? Crack! Crack! The sound of feathers being pulled out, flesh being torn, and bones being broken was mixed together, making one's teeth ache. Blood splattered everywhere. Many people's hair stood on end. If this continued, that red-tailed red phoenix would probably be crippled. Lu Yintong also realized this. She was shocked and angry. She never thought that her contracted divine beast, which she had always regarded as a treasure, would be beaten up like this one day. Stop! Her body was trembling slightly, and her eyes were red. At this moment, even if she didn't want to admit it, she knew that the outcome was already decided. Her contracted divine beast was indeed no match for the other party. It had even become meat on the chopping board, at the mercy of the other party. Dumpling didn't seem to hear her. It continued to leave all kinds of wounds on the red-tailed phoenix's body. Lu Yintong suddenly looked at Chu Luyue and shouted sternly. "Why don't you ask it to stop?" Chu Luyue said slowly. However, he didn't ask Dumpling to stop as she asked. She looked at Lu Yintong. "Senior sister Lu, are you admitting defeat?" You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.